This girl accidentally reincarnated as the tragic female lead of a novel where she's tormented every single day, forced to endure the grueling, backbreaking labor of a common servant, while her manipulative green tea cousin constantly finds new ways to frame her. But little did anyone suspect her true biological father is the mightiest duke in the entire empire, the red-eyed demon king who reigns over the battlefield, striking absolute terror into the hearts of his enemies. Once an invincible god of war, cold to the very core, he transforms into a total softie for his daughter. Truly a top-tier doting daddy, but if anyone dares lay a finger on his precious little girl, he'll ensure their entire clan kicks the bucket in an instant. If you're ready to witness the MC's journey as she conquers her demon king dad's heart, then please follow along with the story. It all begins with a girl skipping down the street, her eyes glued to her phone, when a truck grants her an immediate one-way ticket to log out of the server forever. However, a mysterious angel allows her to reincarnate and live again within a web novel world. With years of experience as a romance novel geek, she knows reincarnation usually leads to only 3 outcomes. One is being a useless damsel constantly getting deceived. 2 is being a villainess committing atrocities until her head is lopped off. And 3 is being a supporting character scammed by a trashy father. Just thinking about it feels like a total fail. So the girl struck a deal with the angel. If she lives again, she must be born with a silver spoon. Have a handsome father and brother, and special powers would be even better. The angel was left speechless, thinking she was asking for the world for someone just getting a second life, but finally he agreed to the terms. But the girl had no idea she had just signed a contract with a devil disguised in angel's clothing. After reincarnating, she realized she'd been scammed. There was no silver spoon in sight, only the sight of her breaking her back scrubbing floors. There was no handsome doting father either, only a wretched uncle, who does nothing but scream at her all day long. He doesn't just treat her like a slave, he cruelly restricts her to only 1 meager meal a day, while her cousin is a certified green tea specialist acting all sweet and comforting on the outside, but in reality, she's a cunning, manipulative brat always plotting to ruin the MC's life. Simply because she didn't finish her exhausting chores today. She suffered a brutal beating and was banned from eating dinner for an entire week. Thinking back to the devil's empty, hollow promises, she felt even saltier about her fate. But no matter the hardship, she remained determined not to bow down to this cruel destiny. The following day marked the lavish birthday of her cousin Clety. While Clety looked radiant like a little princess surrounded by adoring guests, the MC wore tattered servant clothes, huddled alone in a dark corner. Suddenly, Clety accidentally dropped her cake all over her expensive shoes. She was immediately summoned by her uncle to get down and wipe her cousin's footwear. But in truth, this brat staged the entire accident just to humiliate her. The surrounding servants quickly looked away, none of them daring to lift a finger to help her. The uncle continued to viciously curse her out, asking if starving for a week wasn't enough or if she craved the whip next. Left with no choice, she was forced to use her own sleeve to scrub the shoes of Clety, her pride and dignity utterly trampled in front of the entire crowd, causing her to shed bitter tears of burning resentment. Suddenly, a majestic, commanding voice rang out. "Did I remember wrong? My daughter doesn't have blonde hair." The man who spoke was an incredibly striking figure with obsidian hair and piercing blood-red eyes. His frigid aura was so intense that others were terrified to even draw near. He is none other than the legendary Duke Ferriton. The girl was beyond ecstatic, recognizing that this man is the biological father she had never actually met. According to the original plot, the Duke abandoned his daughter because she lacked his signature hair and eye color. Seeing the Duke suddenly appearing in this place left the uncle absolutely paralyzed with terror. But the Duke didn't spare him a single glance. His intense gaze was fixed solely on her. He then demanded to know why his daughter looked so gaunt and haggard. She realized in that moment this was her one golden chance to escape her evil uncle's family. She immediately blurted out to the Duke that she looked like a wreck because she was forbidden from bathing. "I'm an expert at cleaning and will polish your boots every day. I'll scrub them until they sparkle." Her miserable state was truly that of a heart-wrenchingly obedient and sensible child. Tears surged like a broken dam, venting years of suppressed agony from her uncle's abuse. She impulsively wailed to the Duke, "I don't want to stay here anymore." She had always yearned for a father who cherished her as much as the Marquis adored Clety. She desperately lunged forward to cling to his legs, sobbing and pleading, "Please take me away with you." He remained silent, but abruptly extended his massive arm, terrifying the little girl. Is he about to silence her? Permanently? But instead of a blow, she felt his powerful grip hoisting her high into the air. Staring into that formidable face devoid of even a flicker of emotion made her feel even more utterly intimidated. Suddenly, the Duke barked an order to his subordinates to immediately withdraw and retreat. She could hardly fathom that she had actually escaped that hellhole just like that. She couldn't suppress her sheer jubilation, her aura glowing more radiantly than a star. Then without warning, the Duke muttered a low incantation, and an immediate piercing shriek shattered the air. Clety, who was gloating maliciously moments ago, now sat in the dirt, crying, her fancy dress shredded into pathetic rags. Duke Ferriton, beyond his lethal handsomeness, was infamous for his petty streaks, which is why he decimated that brat's dignity, leaving the little girl cradled in his arms completely stunned and bewildered. She watched in awe as the Marquis didn't dare utter a single word to demand justice for his own daughter. Upon opening her eyes, she found herself resting within a residence that was incredibly opulent and breathtakingly magnificent. An army of servants hovered nearby, ready to cater to her every whim and fancy. 10 days had passed in this sanctuary, and the jagged wounds on her legs had finally vanished. Her vitality had surged, leaving her healthier than ever. Yet, since that fateful day, the Duke hadn't visited his daughter once. Though she longed to see him, the memory of shamelessly clinging to his leg left her so mortified she wanted to vanish. But even without affection, she felt satisfied. Here, feasting and dressing well, one must be grateful for the basics. According to the lore, the Duke is a righteous guardian tasked with maintaining the Empire's fragile peace. But judging by his user interface, his operating system seems glitched. He looks exactly like a ruthless demon king. In this novel, there are two types of villains. One is a low-life thug, like Marquis Terenka, Clety's dad, whose face is just begging for a punch. But in stark contrast, the Duke with his gloomy aura, radiating pure murderous intent, is actually a genuine hero at heart. The first objective, returning to the Duke's citadel, was a massive success. Though she was still salty about that shady angel, her current mission was to personally scrub the windows to earn her keep, sending the staff into a chaotic panic as no one could restrain her. The servants were breaking out in cold sweats, frantically explaining, "Milady, you've clearly misunderstood the situation. The young miss is now the precious daughter of Duke Ferriton, so there's no need for such grueling labor." But the girl knew the cold, hard truth. If she were truly his flesh and blood, she would never have been discarded at the Marquis' estate. It was no different in her past life. She was abandoned by her own parents as a child, which is why she hungered for a family's warmth. While she was working with feverish energy, the Duke materialized out of thin air and called her name, nearly making her jump out of her skin. Facing his terrifying visage made the little girl almost wet her pants, yet she desperately tried to maintain her composure. Since no one had assigned her these tasks, she had taken it upon herself to perform manual labor to pay for her meals. He roughly scooped her up like a dangling sack of potatoes and marched away. Tears welled in her eyes as she gripped him in terror. "Don't tell me he's going to dump me under a bridge." But she was instantly paralyzed, unable to stop her drool at the sight of a banquet overflowing with delicacies. Seated opposite her was her beloved father, radiating a lethal killing intent as he commanded eat. As she began devouring the food faster than a high-speed blender, her utensils moving in a blur. The second the little girl paused her fork, he immediately pressured her. "Why have you stopped eating?" She had stuffed herself so much she was literally about to gag, yet she endured the pain, fearing that if she stopped, her very kind father, with those glowing predatory eyes, might just bite her head off, let alone exile her from the mansion. While she was trembling like a leaf, unable to swallow another morsel, a maid luckily intervened to save the day. Unlike the young masters, the young lady has a tiny stomach, and overeating might cause her severe distress. It was a basic fact known to everyone. Yet, upon hearing it, the old man stood frozen as if he'd just received forbidden knowledge. He was genuinely profoundly shocked. The maid who possessed the courage to speak up was Anna. Surprisingly, she wasn't punished for her insolence, and was unexpectedly dispatched by the Duke himself to be solely responsible for her care from this very moment. Gaining her own personal maid left her visibly ecstatic, finally feeling like she was truly allowed to belong here. But to the Duke, that was clearly a given, making the old man look grumpy as he thought, "What kind of nonsense is she spouting now?" When her father asked, "Can you really not eat another bite?" she nodded so hard her head nearly rolled off. Eating more would be a game over for sure, old man. Suddenly, father and daughter were plunged into a heavy silence, neither uttering a single word to the other. It turns out, the Duke had zero sense of the vibe and just sat there, boring his intense gaze into his tiny daughter, making her weep internally as she wondered, "Is he planning to crunch my bones and swallow me whole or what?" Once again, her life was spared by a servant arriving to announce news from the palace, shattering the awkward tension. Before departing, he didn't forget to sternly warn her not to do anything useless and to just stay put in one place. On the surface, the girl acted like a perfect angel with a sunny smile promising to obey, but deep down, she was still determined to scrub every single window. Thanks to her overbearing old man, her stomach was now so bloated she looked 8 months pregnant. She sighed to herself, thinking that surviving this life is playing on extreme difficulty mode. Then, without warning, her maid Anna rushed into the room. Looking incredibly hesitant, desperately reassuring her that the Duke would never abandon her again, practically begging her to just stay still. "I'm begging you, please stop doing the manual labor." The other servants quickly chimed in. "The young lady is still so small she must be plagued by nightmares. If you feel unwell, you must tell us immediately." This left her stunned, her eyes widening because she never expected these people to actually worry about her well-being. Previously, no matter how much she tried to engage them, no one dared to respond, making an introvert like her think she was loathed. Hearing her thoughts, the servants were jolted. None of them intended to be cold. They just realized this little girl simply wanted a normal conversation. Unlike the stoic brothers, the short-haired maid giggled shyly, making the other two turn pale as they hissed at her to stop talking nonsense. She found the reaction bizarre, but whatever, she flashed a heart-melting smile that left the short-haired girl completely dazed. That night, their words replayed in her mind. The weight of being the only daughter in this powerhouse family began to sink in. She wondered if she could ever truly consider these people her real family. While she could sleep easy, knowing she wouldn't be tossed onto the streets, she was technically a child born from the Duke's affair in this reincarnation. She still hasn't encountered the mother yet, which only fueled her growing sense of insecurity, especially since the Duke is a man defined by powerful black hair and those striking blood-red eyes. But compared to his dark aesthetic, she looks like the neighbor's kid with soft pink hair and emerald eyes like Paraiba tourmalines. They don't look like 2 drops of water at all. One is a premium bottle of Fujiwa and the other is basic well water. Remembering the Marquis' taunts about her not being a blood relative, a terrifying image of the old man, a literal demon tyrant giving her a one-shot execution, made a violent chill run down her spine. Staring at her reflection in the mirror, her eyes sparked with raw determination. She would find a way to survive by any means necessary. Even if she isn't his biological daughter, maybe he'll spare her life out of sheer pity for the time spent raising her. With a sudden burst of momentum, she marched toward the Duke's private study, standing before the massive doors with total resolve. Suddenly, a wave of cowardice washed over her, and she let out a heavy, shaky sigh. She violently shook her head to banish the negative thoughts and boost her sagging spirits. While she was still focused on her deep breathing exercises before she could even strike a pose, the servant suddenly swung the door wide open and invited her in, scaring the absolute daylight out of her. She was squirming inside, screaming, "How on earth did you know I was standing there, man?" She fought to keep her cool and stepped inside only to be instantly stunned by her old man's lethal top-tier visuals. Time to start the Operation Suck Up. She instantly activated her sparkly flower filter and called out, "Father," with the brightest expression she could muster. As if radiating a divine halo, she rushed over to hug his leg and lay on the flattery. "I missed you so much, Daddy." This left the high-ranking officials at the meeting so utterly shell-shocked they didn't dare breathe a word. Their bizarre reactions made her question her entire existence, but she quickly pushed those doubts aside, continuing to beam with a sunny smile to charm her old man who seemed to be peering straight through his daughter's soul. He wore a look of pure boredom. "You're clearly uncomfortable around me," catching her off guard. She didn't expect him to read her so easily, so she immediately flipped her Hollywood actress switch. She flashed a smile brighter than the stars. "From now on, I'll stay by your side to bridge the gap and bond." The real goal was to farm affection points, but before she could execute the plan, the old man used his weird habit of grabbing her by the shirt to dangle her. Though it felt a bit awkward being hoisted like she wasn't even his kid, she desperately tried to keep her composure and launched a secondary flattery offensive, reaching out with both hands to touch the Duke's flawless porcelain smooth face, praying to the heavens that he wouldn't fly into a murderous rage and bite her head off. Then a holographic window suddenly flickered into existence, declaring conditions met, checking Ertzen's contract background check complete. She was left completely floored, like what on earth is manifesting in front of her old man right now? The interface continued to scroll, displaying the awakening of the just end cut attribute. She suspected a hallucination until she spotted that name, Ertzen, on the system board. It was a name she could never ever possibly forget. That was the name of the swindler who had scammed and betrayed her. Just seeing his deceptive face made her tremble with fury while lost in thought. Yet her old man had only heard her praise his skin for being as smooth as a newborn baby's. Cold sweat began to pour off her like a torrential waterfall. She was certain that this time she was absolutely toast. But unexpectedly, he simply settled her onto his lap just like that. Before her brain could process the situation, her squishy, chubby cheeks were treated like stress toys as he poked and pinched them at his leisure. Seeing her face being kneaded like dough, she just accepted her fate, having heard that touching a child's cheeks can boost favorability. The old man grunted, comparing her round cheeks to those of a pufferfish. Puffing out its gills, is he losing it? But she only dared to shriek internally, not letting a single peep escape her lips. So, for the remainder of the day, wherever he went or whatever he did, he lugged the little girl around like a doll. Escorted to the bathroom, she stood rigid like a statue, quickly sniffing herself to see if she reeked enough to be dunked in the tub, remembering she'd mentioned she was a mess from being denied baths. But she quickly dismissed the thought. There's no way a casual remark would be taken to heart by a man like the Duke. Refusing to get her hopes up, she waited until the servants scrubbed her clean and fragrant before she was finally left in solitude. Now she wondered how on earth to trigger that system window again. The moment the thought crossed her mind, the notification board materialized. Unconfirmed notification. Will you verify the information? As soon as she gave a nod, the text immediately shifted to describe the just end cut attribute, along with a letter from that white-haired devil. This is the power I promised you, buddy, but why isn't the mission to acquire it finished yet? Apparently, the condition was to kiss. The Duke's cheek, a man even more diabolical than a literal demon, as if that were easy, it made her curse like a sailor. Suddenly, the system display updated to show an F-rank attribute, the ability to summon romance fantasy novels once read and utilize the female lead's power. However, with no summoning medium, it's currently unusable. As soon as she laid eyes on it, she was struck with pure shock. But she couldn't help being ecstatic. Her eyes sparkled. It was legendary. Dreaming of the day she'd wield these powers, she'd be so OP, ruling the world would be a cakewalk. Fantasizing about the day magic dances in her palms and no one dares to provoke her, she felt so giddy she started jumping for joy. But before she could savor the moment, the system abruptly demanded a mission to prove her self-worth, and that trashy system basically laughed in her face. Thinking living in a rom-fan world is a breeze, you naive brat. The trial to prove her worth was to refine the ability through her own grit. The task was to retrieve a summoning item for a 500 gold reward. Even if it was tough, she'd secure the bag and clicked accept. Collapsing exhaustedly onto the bed, she wondered where she was supposed to find a summoning item. Such relics are insanely rare national treasures, holy artifacts, or magical heirlooms. They're all locked away by nobles. So, where could she find one? Considering the path of least resistance, she decided to prioritize uncovering what her old man's family treasure was. But she immediately felt like a coward again. Even if it actually existed here, how would she dare ask someone with a face like a demon lord? Before she could even finalize a plan to seize the family heirloom, intense drowsiness washed over her, whatever, she'd just catch some Z's and deal with the stress tomorrow. Waking up the next morning, she realized that throughout the night she had been tossing and turning instead of being properly tucked in. She assumed the maid Anna had thoughtfully tended to her, but it seemed it wasn't her doing at all, given the mountain of gold jewelry and glittering trinkets spread across the table. She couldn't believe these high-end treasures were meant for her. Instead of being thrilled, she wore a slightly pained expression. These look incredibly expensive, don't they? The servants panicked and immediately lectured her. Since the young lady is of the high nobility, if you like it, just take it. Never worry about the price. Seizing the opening, she looked at them with shimmering eyes, seeking an excuse to enter the vault. To her shock, the two maids were fired up. Anything in the Duke's domain was hers. She wanted to find a summon item, remembering how her past family used to scream at her for even touching jewelry. Terrified she would be branded a filthy thief, she asked dejectedly, "Is it really okay for someone like me to see that?" The servants who heard her looked absolutely devastated, a reaction she couldn't quite fathom. The short-haired maid couldn't take it anymore. She forgot her rank and rushed forward to pull her into a hug, never expecting a child of only a few years to utter something so heart-wrenching. Realizing she was making everyone too emotional, she reached out her tiny hand to pat the maid's back, whispering that she was fine. She quickly leaned into the hug. Now she knew she was no longer alone, and having these people care for her was more than enough to make her happy. Leaving the servants so moved, they all scrambled over to join the group hug. This was the very first time she had ever experienced such warmth from total strangers, and she was absolutely soaking it up, reveling in the affection while nuzzling into Anna's gentle, warm hand. After helping her change, they couldn't help but feel a surge of indignation for their young lady. How could the Marquis's trinkets even compare to a single corner of the Duke's grand mansion? Hearing that, she felt a wave of conviction that she absolutely had to discover if a summoning medium was hidden among the family heirlooms. But before she could set out, a servant suddenly appeared to announce that her old man wanted to have breakfast and boba together, triggering a total panic, like why so sudden? Is he possessed? Things were going so well. Just the thought of sitting down for a meal with the intimidating Duke was enough to give her instant indigestion. She cast a suspicious glance at him, but he remained as unbothered as ever, merely huffing and glaring back. But remembering her top priority was to cozy up to him to save her own skin, she immediately toggled on good daughter mode, all flattery and flowery smiles promising to eat well. Yet her radiant, beaming face was met with stone-cold indifference as he served her a giant slice of ignore cake. He acted like he didn't care a lick yet when he saw her polish off an entire pudding in a single go and read, "I'm still hungry," all over her face. He quickly slid his own portion over to her. He was a total tsundere, pretending to be buried in the paper as if he didn't give a damn, though she was still a bit timid and shaky. Her intense cravings won out and she stealthily stole a small bite, figuring one mouthful wouldn't hurt. After a long while, she finally surrendered to her overwhelming hunger and quickly shoved it into her mouth. Oh my god, pure bliss! She'd never tasted anything this heavenly before. But after letting her eat her fill, the Duke just stared at her intensely as if he wanted to grind her bones and swallow her whole, making the little girl break out in a cold sweat. "Stop staring at me. I'll barf it back up for you if I have to." Not knowing what her old man was plotting, he suddenly, without a word, extended his massive arm to snatch her up. She thought she was about to be crushed like a ripe orange. Who would have guessed he just wanted to carry his daughter? It made her heart skip a beat. Thinking back, today wasn't like a normal day where he vanished the moment she opened her eyes. Unexpectedly, he was in the mood for a joint breakfast, sparking a sudden thought. Could he have been waiting for her on purpose? Suddenly, she didn't know why, but she was back to sitting in this demonic Duke's lap while he was buried in paperwork, making her seriously question her life choices. Not understanding what was up with this old man, she fidgeted awkwardly and stole nervous glances at him. While the old man was busy with the same thought, observing his precious daughter's every expression, she seemed quite well behaved. Next time, he decided he'd definitely give her his pudding again. He didn't notice her awkwardness at all. Clearly, this was the ultimate goal of her survival plan. She had to latch onto this man to survive, but after being so thoroughly pampered, like that she couldn't mask the embarrassment on her face and quickly shook her head like crazy. She had to buckle down and focus on connecting and building their relationship. Seeing the kid constantly wobbling made him wonder what was wrong, giving her a sudden start. But then she flipped her attitude faster than a pancake, a radiant smile on her lips, chirping that she wanted to look at pretty things outside, seeing that Anna stepped up and spilled the beans. Today, the young lady is scheduled to visit the sanctuary room, making her heart drop. "Why'd you snitch, sis? With an ally like this, I'm totally cooked." She immediately hallucinated 7,749 scenarios where touching the heirloom would enrage him and lead to torture and cold chains. But to her absolute shock, her old man just carried her off to inspect the family treasure himself, even though documents that needed solving were piled up in massive heaps on his desk. She couldn't fathom why he'd abandoned his work just to personally escort her there. While the servants trailed behind them, exhausted, the grand majestic scale of the treasury left her jaw on the floor. There wasn't a single item here that wasn't shimmering. Not just heirlooms, but legendary spoils of war were displayed and guarded in this place. Suddenly, she was drawn to a blinding ethereal light emanating from a box. Quickly peeking and snooping around, she saw it was a rare, ancient book, but it wasn't quite what she was searching for. Suddenly, her tiny genius brain clicked. The system dubbed her the reader, and the most fitting item for a reader would obviously be that. After a deduction sharper than Sherlock Holmes, she quickly asked her old man what that book was. Finding out it was a sealing book made her face drop in disgust. If a demon popped out and bit her head off, that'd be a permanent log out for her reincarnation. Seeing her so spooked, the servant quickly stepped up to reassure her that there were currently no entities sealed inside it. Though it wasn't occupied yet, it was a treasure from the first-generation Duke, which is why it was enshrined in such a luxurious place. Hearing that, she immediately switched to actress mode, putting on a flowery, sparkling look. "Can I touch it?" Before her old man could refuse, her eyes got all big and teary like a puppy's, cranking her cutie filter to max level. But who knew this move would be useless against the old man? He stayed firm and gave her the cold shoulder. Looks like the plan totally tanked. Clueless on how to seize the summoning catalyst, the system suddenly flared with a pious mission. "Congrats, you've located the summoning medium. Show off your ability. Condition: convince the Duke to gift you the summoning item. Reward 5,000 gold lottery ticket." Hearing that made her hair stand on end like a startled cat as she cursed the system nonstop. With honeyed words, "This game offers 0 respawns, so what happens if I literally lose my head?" But unexpectedly, this trash system shanghaied her into the mission anyway, flashing the penalty for a refusal. Exiting the bus of life. Now, isn't that just a kick in the teeth? The moment she saw the farewell to life penalty, she forced out an incredibly gentle smile. But in reality, her soul was nonstop screaming and cursing that white-haired devil's entire bloodline. Before she could even plot a raid on that guy's estate, the system triggered a mission acceptance bonus, hints activated. Turns out, accepting grants high energy perks in the form of guidance. Let's check the hint that the system wants to give her to complete the mission. But immediately, that dog water system left our little girl absolutely stunned and bewildered. She couldn't believe her eyes when looking at the handsome, cool, and ice-cold face of the demon duke, because a heart shape was drawn right on his cheek. Contemplating the hint meant she had to plant a kiss on the duke's cheek, made her face turn bright red. In her father's eyes, that look made her resemble a startled frog. "Are you seriously pulling the dad card right now, old man?" She quickly tried to stay calm. "Anyway, a hint is just a hint. The condition doesn't mention kissing, so just acting cute should work." No sooner said than done. Using a voice as sweet as honey, she called out, "Daddy," sounding heart-melting enough. She didn't hide it, promising to touch it very carefully and wanting him to bring it out for her to see. The duke's ice-cold face when seeing his daughter's puppy-like acting remained silent as a grave, his gaze unchanged. Unexpectedly, he was this tough to crack. Suddenly, his arm shot out and snatched the little girl into a hug, leaving her face a mask of pure terror, thinking that if that arm just crushed her, it'd be game over for her life right then and there. But unexpectedly, heart icons suddenly started shooting out from him everywhere, making her jump. It seemed like her old man's favorability for his daughter was constantly rising. Seeing that, she quickly seized the opportunity and wrapped both arms around her dad's neck. Going all in, she directly planted one on his face, leaving the duke utterly stunned. This strategic maneuver from the kid really caught him off guard. Not just him, but even the servants were scared out of their wits, shocked to the point they couldn't close their mouths. OMG, she finally passed this life's challenge. Before she could celebrate, she suddenly heard a creak. She thought something was coming, but it was the box containing the book, emitting a light so bright it could blind someone. Just like that, the forbidden book fell directly into the duke's hands. Unexpectedly, he really took it out for his precious daughter, leaving the servant nearby unable to stop him even if he tried. Seeing the book she needed right in front of her, she quickly reached out to grab it, but her dad played with her, moving it up and down like a tease, not letting her touch it even a bit. The book was constantly emitting a dark aura, yet it was quite safe with nothing unusual. Currently, the book wasn't imprisoning anything, but it was still called a sealing vessel. So her dad, fearing some lingering residue might affect his daughter, checked it thoroughly first. Never expected the cold-blooded duke to care about her safety this much. She had to look at him in a new light. But the servant looked frantic. After all, the first duke's treasure was an heirloom part of the ferret and family history, fearing it'd get torn in her hands. But he just gave a look, an incredibly friendly glare paired with a melodic voice rising straight from the underworld. "What exactly did you say?" Making the man immediately zip his lip, not daring to peep even a single bit. "Yes, I was wrong, totally wrong." Seeing she was being pampered this much, she raised both hands to receive the book, flattering him that dad is the best. Being praised made her feel great. But he maintained that expression like he wanted to grind her bones and swallow her whole. Fortunately, the hearts, representing the current increase, were still flying everywhere nonstop. Only then could she feel at ease and immediately puckered up for another one to suck up to him. But this old man's tsundere level was just too high. Getting a kiss from his daughter, he just turned his face away in embarrassment as if ignoring her. But she was unfazed. Successfully clearing the mission and clutching the book made her radiate satisfaction. The moment she made contact, the system immediately went ding ding ding, summoning method acquired, prove your worth, mission complete. Best filial piety mission complete, 500 gold reward paid. Finally finishing the mission and escaping the risk of dying, she sighed in relief and leaned into her dad's chest. Plus, the 5,000 gold lottery ticket reward made her feel on top of the world. Suddenly, the system popped up another notification. Duke Ferreton's High Assistant, the Viscount, admires you. Followed by a series of other notifications. The teacher respects you and the high-ranking maid group worships you. Thanks to her influence in the family, she got an extra 500 gold bonus straight into her pocket. Who knew there was a way to pick up cash so easily like this? But turning around, she saw every single one of them looking pale and grim, giving her a massive question mark. One final note, the system offered congratulations. Duke Ferreton's satisfaction from being swayed hit max level, yielding extra compensation. But just look at his fish-out-of-water face and see, does this look like someone whose favorability is maxed out, or is he just terrifying? I thought finishing the mission meant living in the lap of luxury. Time to check my rewards and gotcha tickets. But out of nowhere, the old man clings to me and refuses to let me leave, making me sigh in utter weariness. Suddenly, a group discussing official business mentions investors flocking to a monostone mine run by Marquis Tarenka. But rumors claim even the Duke himself is a silent partner, making Marquis Sheridan green with envy and targeting the mine. The catch is a massive obstacle. Despite the risks in Manastone, mining investors are swarming due to recent policies. I managed to eavesdrop on the list in my dad's hand. Dukes, marquises, all the Empire's biggest shots. They're the ultimate power players of this kingdom. Looks like they're making moves because this mine produces elite high-quality mana. But he didn't give a damn about the profit. What rankled him most was the slander that he was involved in such shady business. The Duke's eyes flashed with malice, his entire body radiating a lethal aura. That Marquis Saradin, he dared to invent lies while drunk to slander me. That Marquis Saradin had been frequenting high-end drinking parties and clubs. Many influential dukes chose to stay silent, thinking silence is golden. The three of them acted like they weren't in the same boat, making sure they never appeared together in public. Anyone could guess those two were just investing recklessly in some nonsense, going all in for a high-stakes gamble. As the Duke spoke, I suddenly couldn't help but chime in. It seems Marquis Terenka spoke to them directly about this, leaving everyone present absolutely floored, causing the room to fall into an eerily suffocating silence. I immediately realized I had let a massive secret slip. Hurriedly covering my small mouth, oh crap, seeing the Duke's incredibly shocked face made me paralyzed with fear. I quickly tried to damage control by saying I merely heard Uncle Marquis Terenka mention it once. Trying to cover my tracks, I claimed that while at the Marquis' estate, I saw a flashy person saying the Duke had invested. I tried not to spill everything I saw about their secret deal, actual evidence. I remembered a pitch-black card that was quite sparkly and unique, and pointed directly at that identical card resting on the desk. The moment the servant picked it up, they looked extremely apprehensive about the weight of my words. Just when I thought I had survived the dangerous moment, my heart skipped a beat in pure terror. A chaotic scene erupted among the staff upon hearing the Duke had supposedly funded Marquis Terenka. Screams rang out incessantly in my ears. Rumor had it Duke Ferriton was part of a grand scam, and right now the entire office was sinking into a deathly silence. I looked up and met a cold, incredibly terrifying gaze, making my heart drop and pound painfully against my ribs, because this man's gaze was clearly dissecting me. It was obvious he suspected I was a spy. Terrified, I quickly explained I heard it while shining shoes for Uncle. Not daring to lie anymore, fearing if a mistake was found, my head would roll. According to the documents, the man opposite him held all the vouchers issued to Marquis Terenka over the years were intended to raise his daughter, me. Hearing that, I quickly waved my hands in frantic denial. No way that happened, my whole body trembling. Because in all this time, I had only ever heard that my father sent astronomical sums every month to the castle, but not a single penny was used to actually raise me. I then recounted the miseries I endured. The Marquis said there was no money, so if I wanted to eat, I had to clean diligently, live in a hovel, and obey his every command. Just mentioning it made me shudder. Whispers broke out among the crowd, unable to believe a Marquis could treat a child so inhumanely. The blue-haired man looked skeptical because everyone knew Terenka was famous for adoring his daughter. So, how could he treat a little girl like that? Seeing no one believed me, I lowered my voice. Every word the Marquis ever spat at me felt like a curse. Your father abandoned you and never paid. The constant fear made my heart race as I tried to recount every ounce of suffering I had endured. To dispel their suspicion, I said I could only eat 2 meals a day, sometimes only 1, or even had to starve. I tried to look as pitiful and harmless as possible, acting my age. Trembling from the fear of being exposed as a fake child, but that shaking made them think I was reliving the trauma the Marquis caused. Enduring it all to make them believe I was just an innocent kid, I didn't dare miss a single word. Tears couldn't be held back and began to well up. I hurriedly tossed the book in my hand aside, directly mimicking the shoe-shining process from back then, bowing low at the Duke's feet, explaining incessantly. When I shine shoes like this, Uncle told that person to use this card as investment proof. Tears fell like rain as I cried, begging them to believe my story. Suddenly, a frigid voice rang out, "Stop!" The Duke's gaze in this moment was utterly stripped of humanity, his face a storm of murderous intent as he hissed, "I ask you, who exactly do you think you're interrogating?" I thought I was the one under suspicion, leaving me stunned as the murderous aura brushed past me, directly ensnaring the group of officials behind me, making them writhe in extreme pain, unable to even draw breath. I couldn't hide my bewildered face, quickly turning around to see them gasping. I saw the Duke's hands reaching out slowly toward me, looking worried that I had been forced to remember those miserable things again. Realizing that he didn't harbor a shred of suspicion toward her, but was purely agonizing over her trauma. However, the hand he began to extend suddenly hesitated and slowly pulled back. She instinctively lunged for that massive hand as if terrified of losing its comforting warmth, startling him. He never anticipated that this fragile little child wouldn't be paralyzed with fear of his presence as he proceeded to hoist his daughter into his arms once more. Noticing her sleeve was grime from her desperate attempts to polish his boots, he cherished her tiny arm and barked an urgent command for a master tailor demanding dozens of exquisite outfits be crafted for his precious daughter. Then he continued to use his rough hand to gently pat the little girl's head, leaving her stunned as a deep crimson flush spread across her face. One moment she was in the Duke's formidable office, yet the instant she opened her eyes she was rolling around in bed. She must have drifted off mid-meeting. She quickly seized the moment to check on her mysterious book, unexpectedly discovering ethereal currents of light swirling around it. They were so dazzling they left her breathless, shimmering like transparent bling-bling bubbles, and the second she touched them, a violent burst of radiance erupted. Incredibly, a crown materialized, and the book was consumed by a surge of raw magic, granting it a completely revamped UI. Though a bit rattled by the book's newfound polished luster, she checked to see if any secrets were etched within, wondering if it contained perilous things like forbidden sorcery or powers stolen from the gods. Suddenly, a wave of cowardice hit her. What if this grimoire could actually summon that insufferable, silver-haired devil? She was a nervous wreck, not knowing what lethal dangers were lurking inside. But when she mustered all her courage to pull it open, it was void of content. Absolutely nothing happened, leaving her with a massive question mark. Luckily, the system window flickered on, showing the summoning seal had been broken. The usage restrictions on the just and cut attribute have finally been dismantled. Now she could truly wield her hidden power, and her sheer jubilation was written in every line of her face. The system flashed a new objective: Path of the Sage. Condition: use your focus to summon a book extract and ability and manifest it. Reward: 100 gold. She quickly reached out to accept the quest. To any observer, she looked like she was just sitting there having a tantrum, trapped in her own world like a total lunatic. She whipped her head around frantically to see if anyone had caught her acting like a complete weirdo. Finding herself alone, she thrust her hand forward and chanted the incantation. "O thou of cold blood, appear before me." The system pinged, noting that the summoning pool for bronze rank just and cut consists of the romance fantasy novels the reader has consumed. So she quickly selected a skill from the character in "Even if I'm the only one appreciated, I'll still run away." But after the system began processing the request, a glaring, out-of-memory error popped up, making her want to scream as her soul withered slightly. She didn't expect this system to be such a blatant money sink. One could exchange 5,000 lottery tickets for 5,000 memory units, with no other choice, and despite the pain of losing the cash, she reluctantly agreed to the trade. Instantly, the system swapped the UI to a lucky spin wheel prominently featuring the mocking face of that silver-haired devil. The second she saw that guy's smug face, she smelled a scam a mile away, but she glared at the wheel and, biting the bullet, wagered one 5,000 gold ticket. She clasped her hands in desperate prayer, hoping the gacha would grant her 5,000 units, but a red light flashed, of course, and the system mocked, "Congrats, you won a measly 100 memory units." This sent her into an immediate tantrum because she was deep in the red. Burning 5,000 just to get back 100? Isn't that just absolute insanity? That cursed system continued to taunt her. "Congrats, you now possess 100 memory units." She wondered if that was even enough to manifest a single novel. While wallowing in depression, she remembered a certain notification she had yet to open. Inside was the special compensation for the Duke's high favorability. To her shock, the bonus was a free novel rental ticket, already fully paid for leaving her standing there with a blank, stunned expression. The system began badgering her. "Hurry up, old lady. Do you want to summon a novel with the ticket? It only lasts for 3 days from the moment of summoning." This flipped her mood from total despair to pure hype, suddenly as fresh as a daisy. She never expected such an elite perk. As she dropped to her knees and bowed toward the Duke's chambers, thanking him more fervently than a religious fanatic. Before she could take action, a sudden knock came. She moved with lightning speed to shove the book under her pillow. But Anna the maid delivered news that left her shell-shocked. She had actually been snoring away in the arms of that terrifying demon Duke. She was so mortified, her voice was visibly trembling. I fell asleep on his chest." She was scared to death, yet Anna completely missed the panic, thinking the sight of the little one nestled in her father's massive arms was the most heart-meltingly cute thing she'd ever seen. But it got even better. It wasn't Anna who brought her back. The Duke had personally carried his daughter all the way to her bedroom. Hearing the news made her so embarrassed, she wanted to find a pair of giant pants to pull over her head. Anna explained on the old man's behalf that he truly cherishes her, even though the Duke appears to be a cold perfectionist with zero free time. A frostbitten man who needs no one. But according to Anna, the Duke is just a very clumsy first-time father, so he's likely just a bit overwhelmed. Witnessing this gentle, fatherly side of the Duke for the first time left the servants in awe. After all, the Duke is far from normal. Hearing that, she was intrigued and asked, "How exactly is he different?" causing them to realize they'd said way too much and immediately clamp their hands over their mouths. Attempted to maintain a stiff, forced smile to quickly pivot the conversation. But she couldn't bypass those sharp eyes, sensing that Duke Ferriton definitely has something bizarre going on. Meanwhile, Clety's father, the Marquis, was absolutely ballistic, shattering the wine glass in his hand. It wasn't just the Duke. Other Marquises had yanked their capital, and top clients were ghosting him, making him incredibly salty. His 5-year reign crumbled with one wave of Ferriton's hand, and the terror was real. If his lies about the Duke's backing were exposed, especially the child support fraud, his head would be on the chopping block. He was drained and frantic, unable to mask the panic on his face. If his own father found out, he'd be totally cooked. He instantly ordered his subordinates to intercept all intel, ensuring not a single whisper reached the old man, and immediately summoned Clety. He planned to use the girl to visit the estate and suck up to the Duke, but given her bratty ego, she stubbornly refused at first, demanding that the peasant girl come to her instead. But after her father manipulated her with the fact that the brat was forbidden from leaving the Duke's fortress and couldn't possibly visit, the little brat Clety looked smug. After all, she assumed the girl was loathed, and only she was charitable enough to play with her. Hearing Clety agree to go made the Marquis giddy with relief, reminding her to meticulously observe the girl's living conditions and the Duke's true nature. Having received her orders, the young Clety wore a sinister smirk. "Dear cousin, I'm coming to play with you." Looking at the sketches she was painstakingly detailing, one might mistake them for some bizarre water demons. But who would have guessed she was pouring all her affection into painting a portrait of Anna? The maid trembled, unable to believe her eyes as she clutched her mouth in shock. The MC thought her art was so hideous that the maid was offended, making her go all sulky. But it turns out the sister was just having an emotional breakdown, as she immediately hoisted the drawing to brag, moved to tears, and vowing to preserve it as a sacred family heirloom. Before anyone could stop her, Anna sprinted off with the masterpiece to flex on the entire neighborhood. Then the short-haired maid overreacted too, the second she laid eyes on the sketches. She felt her life's work was complete, and could go to her grave peacefully with this intangible cultural heritage. Even the short-haired one went full Stan mode, wanting to add the piece to her MC collection and plaster it all over her walls with a blushing face. The girl was questioning her sanity because everyone in this mansion seems a bit delulu and unhinged in their own way. Then suddenly Anna announced she'd be escorting her to the greenhouse for some playtime today. Stepping into the colossal garden, she couldn't contain her glee and frolicked like an actual child. But as the saying goes, short legs running fast only lead to a faceplant. She measured the ground, landing face first in the dirt with her butt sticking straight in the air. Taking a nasty spill before she could even process the pain, she was scared out of her wits. The person looming directly over her was her young, old man, staring down at her like she was a pathetic bug. He pulled his classic tsundere act. Seeing her fall, he didn't even offer a hand, so she just shamelessly reached out her arms to act spoiled. With the eyes beginning to well up, she pouted, "Pick me up, old man." This made him sigh in pure exasperation, but he quickly surrendered to his precious daughter and reached out to scoop her up. But the moment he spotted the raw scrape on her knee, his eyes narrowed dangerously. Looking extremely irritated. Just like that, he insisted on carrying the little girl out of the greenhouse without a single word, acting in a frantic rush. Turns out it was to apply medicine, but he couldn't even maintain dad mode for long before grumbling, "I knew you were frail, but not this pathetic." His blunt words made her flinch and spiral into thought. Was her fragility why she was discarded? She lacked magic unlike him. She began to fear she really was an illegitimate child. Meanwhile, the old man was fumbling with the medicine bottle, making the servants whisper, "Should we show him how it's actually done?" By the time he finally pried it open, he had ointment smeared all over his face. Seeing that terrifying visage made her soul leave her body for a fleeting moment. Yet unexpectedly, he personally used his own hand to tenderly apply the medicine for his daughter, leaving the servants standing nearby shell-shocked while the Duke looked so incredibly tense it was as if he were struggling with a severe case of constipation. Seeing him like this suddenly made him much less intimidating, making her cheeks flush a bright scarlet. While he was practicing his Father of the Year routine, a servant reminded him that everyone was waiting in the briefing room. The request to put her down made others recoil because of the "I'll incinerate you" glare he shot at that maid. Without a word, he simply hauled his daughter into the high-level conference with him. Those who saw his face felt that even if their ancestors rose from the dead, they still wouldn't dare block his path, only silently trailing behind like ghosts. This purple-haired woman was the royal tailor tasked with dressing the elite. This was her first time meeting the Duke's golden child. The signature look of House Ferriton is void black hair and blood-red eyes that look sharp, predatory, and intense, no different from apex beasts. So the tailor couldn't possibly imagine how a youngest daughter with those genes could be anything close to cute. Having totally abandoned hope of seeing an adorable child in the Duke's manor upon hearing his arrival, the tailor could only whisper to herself, "Don't be too disappointed. You know the monstrous genes of this family," bracing herself for another terrifying mini-Duke. But she was completely flabbergasted and practically collapsed the moment she laid eyes on her, looking totally different from her expectations, witnessing such a pure ethereal angel standing right before her. She couldn't prevent a massive comedic nosebleed from erupting. However, she immediately had to check her behavior under the weight of the Duke's soul-crushing glare. "You've got it all wrong! Your Grace, I'm not some creepy lolicon!" Following his stern commands, the tailor frantically began taking her measurements. But this overprotective dad wouldn't even set his daughter down for a second. Only after a reminder did he realize his grip, while the designer pivoted to her professional flattery skills, lying through her teeth about how the lady is so well behaved in the Duke's arms because she must truly adore him. Even though he was floating on cloud nine, he maintained his typical cold Duke facade, grumbling that she's a nuisance while low-key flexing that he's so popular she clings to him daily. Seeing that she doubled down on her sucking up tactics, noting that since he personally carries his daughter everywhere, he must truly treasure her, making the ministers in the back row question their entire reality, exchanging looks of utter bewilderment. They quickly hopped on the flattery train like the tailor spinning lies more dramatic than an opera singer. Our young lady must absolutely worship the Duke. One sycophant on the left, another on the right. Everyone was competing to see who could hype the old man up the most. Yet look at his expression, he looked more murderous than if he were about to decimate the whole world, scaring the absolute daylights out of her. While those officials remained oblivious and kept blabbing their nonsense nonstop, even the young masters have never been graced with a hug. It's so incredibly enviable. Thanks to the desperate efforts of that thirsty crowd, the old man, who loves acting against his true feelings, finally let a tiny smirk slip through. But he continued to mask his daughter complex and looked away, pretending to be bored. Yet, they wouldn't quit and turned to ask the kid if she loved her old man or not. When she shyly nodded, yes, they pushed their luck, eyes sparkling as they pressured her with a "how much?" She could practically feel the invisible psychic pressure in their eyes, forcing her to declare, "Daddy is the best." But she crushed their expectations when her tiny, delicate hands only gestured a minuscule, tiny pinch amount, while giving a bright, flowery smile. "Only this much. Are you satisfied now, you creeps?" The room suddenly fell deathly silent, making the servants break out in a frantic cold sweat as they desperately scrambled to fix the vibe. Wait, didn't the lady just say she cherished the Duke? Tears streamed down their faces as they prepared to dig their own graves, praying to the heavens for a painless execution. But who knew she'd save the day with a legendary comeback, spreading her arms wide. Ta-da! This is how much I love Daddy, as massive as the entire universe combined. That dazzling, sparkly smile made their expressions shift instantly. Some shielded their eyes, others clutched their hearts. Ugh, is she a literal angel? Turning around, she saw her old man staring at her. She worried she might have hammed it up a bit too much. But it turns out he just didn't hear clearly and wanted her to repeat those cringy lines, giving her goosebumps, but she committed to the flattery. "I love Papa as much as you've sacrificed for the peace of this world." Hearing his precious daughter say that, his eyes gleamed with triumph as he turned to the others just to flex. "Did you hear clearly what my daughter just said?" The old and young sycophants didn't miss a single beat and immediately began sucking up in unison. "The lady said she loves you more than anything." He was utterly intoxicated by the praise. The old man couldn't conceal the sparkling joy on his face, leaving her speechless. How did I end up with such a petty and immature dad? He still wasn't satisfied and kept pestering her about why she only showed her small finger at the start. But he accidentally walked into his own trap when the little girl put on a heart-wrenching, pitiful face, explaining that it's simply because they've only been together for such a short time. She immediately snuggled into his chest and whispered that if they stay together in the future, that finger space will definitely grow huge. Observing his ego practically inflating with pride at the little girl's smooth-talking answer, the old man actually questioned reality. How could a mere child think so profoundly? But as soon as she looked up, he reverted to his tsundere ways and looked away, pretending to be indifferent. This made her mood tank, thinking her elite flattery earlier had at least earned her some massive brownie points. After cross-checking the measurements, the tailor was stunned because they were drastically different from the sizes requested previously. But she didn't dwell on it and asked the Duke to set the child down so she could begin the dress fitting. But he declared something even more badass CEO than a real tycoon. "No need for a fitting, I'll take the entire collection," leaving the tailor so thunderstruck she couldn't even close her mouth. She never expected such a massive jackpot to hit her out of the blue. She quickly bowed in gratitude. "I'm so thankful. From now on, you're like my true father and mother combined." But taking his gold wasn't that simple. The entire dress design had to be overhauled. First, short sleeves. Second, the cuffs had to be tailored for a perfect fit. He demanded this specifically because he couldn't stand the sight of his daughter having to constantly hitch up her sleeves while wearing them, or bunching them up in her palms, desperate to erase any memory of her living like a lowly servant at the feet of others. This left her completely floored, unable to mask the pure joy shimmering in her eyes. Suddenly, she felt this demon duke wasn't a villain at all, but actually more benevolent than a saint. Just then, the hurricane named Clety made her entrance. Though the brat was still oozing entitlement, the moment she witnessed the magnificent, staggering scale of the Ferriton estate, her face transformed and her eyes sparkled with greed. Her reaction was expected because this place wasn't just massive, it reeked of elite wealth. However, the carriage didn't stop at the front door, sending Clety into a tantrum, though she was powerless since what they saw earlier wasn't even the main villa. By any standard, this building looked more like the imperial headquarters of a legendary clan. As soon as Clety stepped off the carriage, the butler interrogated her. "I don't recall extending an invitation to any guest today." Though briefly stunned that this family was rich enough to employ their own high-tier butler, Clety put on airs like a superior, claiming she was visiting her cousin and required no one's permission. Just like that, she and her servant arrogantly marched in noses buried in the clouds, heading straight for the interior. The moment she swung the doors open, she was paralyzed by a hall so vast and dazzling she couldn't resist running around to inspect every luxury. She accidentally stumbled right into the grand portrait of the Duke. Seeing that terrifying visage didn't intimidate Clety. Instead, she began daydreaming about her father being a man of his stature. She immediately spiraled into a naive delusion that her beauty would surely make the Duke worship her since everyone else had always fallen for it. According to the rumors, Duke Ferriton is black-blooded and cold-hearted, a ruthless reaper who kills without a second thought, but it turns out Clety isn't just delusional, she's straight up delusional. Fantasizing that she could mend his lonely heart and be favored even more than that filthy biological daughter of his. Unable to hide the naked greed on her face, wanting to seize the throne of this splendid house, she swung the inner door open, but Clety was instantly petrified and shocked. She couldn't believe her eyes, an incredibly adorable little girl draped in a dress so radiant it didn't resemble the lowly creature she used to trample under her boots at all. She was so floored, she was literally speechless. She instinctively crushed the hem of her own skirt in a fit of jealous rage. But look at our MC's face. Does she look like she gives a damn about Clety? She served her a massive cold slice of ignore cake. This made the girl so salty, she wheezed through gritted teeth. "I didn't expect you to be even more insolent and ill-mannered than I imagined." But the MC's tongue isn't a pushover anymore. She fired back, "Who's the uninvited pest who doesn't even know how to greet people? It's obvious who the rude one is," sending Clety into a fury as she quickly pivoted the subject, doubling down on her insults by claiming she wasn't even the Duke's real flesh and blood. This left the MC reeling like a bolt of lightning striking from a clear blue sky. Meanwhile, the brat couldn't hide her vile, smug expression because those were the exact words her father had used. That she was merely an illegitimate brat, that her mother used pathetic, low-life schemes on the Duke to conceive her, then abandon her and betrayed the Duke's trust. She let out a despicable, mocking cackle, continuing to degrade her. "How dare you shamelessly use the Ferriton name while living in the Duke's glorious mansion?" While she was being humiliated, the system completely failing to read the room popped up. A new mission startling her so much she forgot to cry. This time the mission is, need a refreshment. Don't you feel that lump in your throat? Isn't your chest feeling tight and frustrated? What you need is a sip of cold soda to kill the stress. Quickly pull that sour potato out by its roots. The bounty for success is 2,000 gold. The penalty is reincarnation failure, though the current mission penalty is temporarily waived. Seeing that her bank balance could absolutely skyrocket, it caused the weak girl's soul to suddenly surge with a massive, buffed strength. She absolutely had to secure that bag. Clety didn't get to act smug for long as she suddenly heard the MC call her out, making her spiral into a shocked panic. Because until this very moment, no one had ever dared to show her such blatant disrespect. She was so livid she began to tremble, glaring with gritted teeth, but the little girl maintained a perfectly chill and unbothered attitude. Quickly activating her Hollywood-level acting skills, she framed her face with her hands to look cute and questioned her back, "Where exactly am I looking down on you?" Successfully triggering the brat so hard she felt like her throat would ignite as she spat out more venom. Acting like a classic wicked stepmother. "The only reason you're eating well and dressing fancy is because my father took pity on you. Those aren't things you deserve to touch." This made the MC pause. Wait, what? Just because I'm a visual queen now? This kid's personality has turned to trash. Why is she acting so middle school edgy? Clety continued with a smug face, hurling slurs at her birth and hitting her where it hurts that she was exiled from the house by the Duke, convinced that this time she'd win like always. But who would have guessed she wasn't the same pushover she used to be? She directly addressed Clety as merely the daughter of Marquis Terenka, leaving her stunned as if she were being looked down upon by a superior. With overflowing confidence now, the little girl declared herself the true lady of House Ferreton. How could a lowly person like her dare to speak so insolently to a high noble? Under the crushing pressure of social hierarchy, she immediately got cold feet, but pure jealousy made her lose her mind, as she desperately shrieked, "Sister!" But before she could bark another word, she was shut down and commanded to address her as lady. After all, that's just basic social etiquette. Finally, being able to flex on this brat made her ego swell with pride. My god, I'm cool as a cucumber. She froze momentarily at the vile slur that she was merely a bastard child born of an affair, before getting right in Clety's face, menacingly demanding to know if she's prepared to face the consequences of her words. Then she swiftly marched over to her bedside and seized the bell pull used to summon the staff outside. Seeing that she was on the verge of ringing the bell, Clety instantly spiraled into a panic and tried to intervene, but she was far too late. The bell chimed and her maids immediately swarmed in. Just as she prepared to settle the hierarchy between a duke and a marquis, Clety recoiled in fake terror, sobbing hysterically. Wait, for real. She's playing the victim card now. Instantly, Clety's personal maid barged in and violently shoved Anna aside. While Clety bawled her eyes out and spun a web of lies, she called me arrogant and tried to force me to bow. Just like her usual routine, Clety masqueraded as the poor, defenseless victim, successfully brainwashing her maid, who then glared at the MC as if she were looking at a pathetic insect. Watching the maid approach her with literal murderous intent made her tremble with instinctive fear. But things are different now. This time, she doesn't have to fear a single soul. Sure enough, her own elite maids instantly appeared and formed a protective wall. If any of you lay a finger on Our Lady, I'll personally bash your heads in. The intruder has tried to flip the narrative, blaming everything on her being stubborn, while they supposedly brought gifts to visit. Clety wiped away her tears while failing to mask a smug, triumphant smirk. I even brought treats just for you, so why are you being so cruel? Flexing her generosity, she pulled out a dress that looked incredibly basic and cheap, yet claimed she had curated it carefully as a gift, then physically forced it upon her, clutching her hand while relentlessly slandering her character. Even though you stole my dress, it's fine. I'll be the bigger person. Let's just make up, okay? The sheer audacity of that shameless brat left her stunned and speechless. Just as she was about to be overwhelmed, a thunderous voice suddenly rang out. What is the meaning of this commotion? Clety flinched as her guilty conscience caught up to her, scurrying toward the door, her face draining of color upon seeing Duke Ferreton, personally arriving with an absolutely legendary badass aura. While the girl was still completely dazed because she never expected the Duke to return to the estate so early, he cast a look of pure disdain at Clety like she was lower than dirt. Stealing my daughter's belongings, and yet you have the nerve to bark this much in my presence. The scene flashes back to earlier when the Duke was preoccupied heading out for a high-level meeting. His bloodthirsty aura was so suffocating that every official in the room was visibly shivering, suffering from low wages and endless overtime. The other ministers sighed, lamenting that they wouldn't be able to secure cream puffs for their daughters. Normally, the Duke wouldn't give a damn, but the mention of fatherly love made him perk up his ears to eavesdrop. He started fantasizing that if he brought home treats, his precious little treasure would rush out to plant a kiss on his cheek. But the sun was already dipping below the horizon and the bakeries were closing. The dads were visibly devastated. Even the Duke saw his mental vision of a sweet kiss from his daughter evaporate into thin air, leaving him absolutely shell-shocked. Because he was denied a kiss from his daughter, the Duke's face was now radiating more lethal intent than a villain wanting to delete the world. He terrified the others so much they were on the verge of tears, fearing that one wrong word would mean game over for their heads. Unexpectedly, with that terrifying demonic face, he grumbled, "Where exactly is this bakery located?" Hearing that, the entire group froze in place, unable to process the words. Wait, did I just hear that correctly? Suddenly feeling a lethal chill down their spines, that predatory gaze like a wild beast wanting to shred them into a salad left them paralyzed. But suddenly someone acting bright as a spring flower dared to tease the Duke, shocking everyone else to their very core. They quickly whispered frantic threats to read the room while the Duke literally crushed the pen in his hand. That person finally grasped the gravity of the situation and cried a river of regret, Suddenly, his trusted aide entered and whispered a confidential report into his ear. Sending the Duke into a blind fury, he stood up and slammed the table with a deafening bang, then pivoted and stormed out, ignoring the officials behind him who were desperately begging him to stay since the meeting wasn't even over. This left everyone breathless with shock. What could possibly be so dire to trigger such an extreme reaction? But it wasn't the end of the world or the extinction of mankind, it was something far more trivial. Last time, he abruptly canceled a summit just because he heard his precious daughter was cleaning windows herself. And this time, it was Clety's unannounced intrusion at the manor while he was away, which is exactly why he's wearing this "I'll slaughter everyone" expression right now, making his servant have 1,000 questions about why the Duke loses his cool more over things involving his youngest daughter than he does about Marquis Terenka using their past ties to scam the entire nobility. Her arrival has become a divine miracle to them, for everyone knows the Ferreton household is beyond bizarre. They never sought to integrate into human society, nor did affection ever exist. His 3 sons were the same, but she is the exception. It made the servant lose his composure, accidentally blurting out that the young lady is breathtakingly beautiful, which made the Duke freeze and widen his eyes in a what the hell moment. If that guy has the audacity, just let him try to lay a finger on my daughter. Making the servant break into a cold sweat, hurriedly stammering, "The youngest lady is incredibly precious, don't you agree, my lord?" Yet he frets over the little girl constantly. Because of her tiny legs, she trips whenever she runs and starts sobbing before she even hits the ground. Right when the servant assumed her frailty was due to a lack of mana, he was immediately dismissed from the room. The Duke felt himself becoming utterly unhinged. Every time he heard his daughter whisper she missed him or felt her kiss, it felt alien to him. For the first time since her return, he crept to her chambers to secretly watch over her while she slumbered. At this moment, the servant suddenly shivered, terrified that his lord's inexplicable behavior was a curse of bloodline magic woven by Marquis Terenka, intending to use the girl as a puppet to manipulate the Duke. But who would have guessed that the strangeness he felt was actually centered right in his chest, making him reach up and clench it tight. He couldn't find the words. It was a restless, creeping sensation, leaving the servant utterly speechless and stunned. It's unbelievable that his lord, the pride of the empire, has become this stupid over a child, adoring his daughter yet failing to recognize it. Seeing that smile makes his walls crumble, yet to him, love is just a pathological symptom. The servant realized there was no curse, just a fool of a father obsessed with his kid, but whatever, he doesn't get paid enough for this drama. Surely one day the cold-blooded Duke will realize the name of that symptom is fatherly love. Before returning, he didn't forget to demand the location of the cream puff shop those officials mentioned. But they're all closed now. Who's going to serve you? The old man was immediately met with a very affectionate glare, making the servant hurriedly bow in terror, almost forgetting how truly unhinged his master can be. He originally meant for the servant to buy the cakes, but reconsidered if he went personally, he'd get a kiss. He then ordered a mountain of gifts, making the servant curse under his breath. The official work isn't even done, and now he's on gift shopping duty. On the way back, his face was a mask of murderous intent, thinking of Marquis Terenka. How dare he let his brat mess with his precious gem? Back to the present, while she was still dazed, Clety's face was glowing with fake joy, smiling with squinted eyes. Hurriedly spreading her arms and charging toward the Duke, "Uncle, I'm here!" But unexpectedly, he just brushed past her while delivering a lethal insult. "Why did you allow this raggedy brat into my presence?" Making her entire face stiffen with sheer embarrassment. Clety couldn't fathom that she was being looked down upon as trash. She never saw it coming, while he simply gathered the little girl into his arms with ease. Still determined not to fold, thinking the Duke was just misled by the girl's rumors, she quickly slapped on her innocent face, smiling like a blooming flower. "Uncle, it's a misunderstanding. I'll forgive you because you were clearly deceived." But she immediately pulled a total pick-me stunt, acting like a martyr, grabbing her skirt to bow and apologize on the girl's behalf. After that, she continued her solo performance, slandering the girl for allegedly lying about the stolen dress, making the MC flinch in this moment, trying to suppress her rising emotions while biting her lip. She felt a pang of envy toward Clety's audacity. Since birth, that girl was showered with affection. She never had to hear, "I don't need you," nor was she ever discarded. That's why she thinks she's the center of the universe. But seeing this, the Duke reached his limit, his heart burning with rage. How does this little rat dare to gaslight my daughter? While Clety was still confidently claiming she'd never steal, he immediately interrogated her. "Then what about the dress I saw?" He then trampled on the hideous rag she had brought as a gift, questioning her once more. "Why is the dress I personally commissioned for my daughter now being worn by you?" Leaving her completely paralyzed and shell-shocked. Also, he recalled saying his daughter doesn't have yellow hair. He was clearly out for blood to get her justice. But fearing she would only invite more hatred and pain, the MC didn't dare to hope for a savior. However, things are different now. She is being showered with love and pampering by her old man. Her small, trembling hands were suddenly held tight by his massive ones. Clety still hadn't caught on, confidently asserting that her birthday dress was a gift from her father, acting incredibly smug. Always insisting it was her own exclusive dress that her father prepared for her every single year. Pointing straight at her to accuse her, snarling that it wasn't a dress meant for that retard. Her words were laced with such venom and cruelty that they deeply wounded her soul. Echoes from the marquis' estate rang in her head. Being an abandoned, useless child made her shrink back in fear, but suddenly, Clety felt like she was falling into the clutches of a prehistoric wild beast and cowered in absolute terror. The Duke cast a razor-sharp gaze full of pure, unadulterated disdain, looking down on her like a god from above, making her shake so violently she could only clutch herself while repeating the filth her father and the servants said, calling her a retard. Her legs turned to jelly and she lost all strength, collapsing pitifully onto the cold floor. Facing the suffocating, oppressive power before her, the once arrogant Clety finally realized that the cruel monster from the rumors was the man standing right before her. Duke Ferriton is a man who doesn't know the meaning of sadness. If he cries, it's the blood of his enemies that flows, not his own tears. He was the one before her, radiating a crushing pressure. Her delusions of being pampered and living in luxury were shattered. Even now, she didn't realize her place, thinking everything belonged to her. For such a young child, she really had a death wish. He decided to humor her, using his mana to make the pressure on Clety's body heavier and heavier, his eyes flashing like a predator's. He was going to spare her because she was young, but since she wants to die so badly, he'll gladly oblige. Clearly, Clety's grand delusion was that she was the one looking down on the world. But now, she was the most pathetic creature in the room, weakly wailing for the Duke to save her. After a moment's consideration, he agreed to spare the child's life and coldly ordered her to beat it. After the storm had passed, she was once again pampered, nestled in the Duke's warm lap while enjoying a cup of hot milk in her tiny hands. But she was still reeling from what happened. Since being isekai'd into this world, Clety always branded her a retard, making her feel like her reality was collapsing. She felt herself being swallowed by a familiar darkness, but this time was completely different. The sensation of being wrapped in the void was strangely soft and peaceful. When her vision returned, the nightmare had vanished. The terror known as Clety was no longer in the mansion. Suddenly, a group of elite guards rushed inside and knelt down to confess their failure because today, a brat like Clety had sneaked in and caused total chaos. That was why the Duke was livid, wanting to interrogate those who failed to strictly manage and protect his inner sanctum. Hearing this sent a jolt of shock through her, but things went nuclear when those men scrambled to confess their sins, begging for the death penalty, ready to pay for their incompetence with their lives. Still dazed, she looked left and right at the chaos. Was the old man really going to execute them right here? But before he could act, those men had already pressed sharp blades against their own throats. Unable to explain the situation, she quickly shrieked, "Stop it right now!" making the guards' every movement freeze instantly in the deathly silent, heavy atmosphere. But those people failed their mission. So, to the Duke, they had to pay the ultimate price for their negligence. Seeing this, she panicked and scrambled for an excuse, claiming Clety just came over for a playdate. Kids fighting and tearing clothes or pulling hair is totally normal local village drama. There was no reason to end lives over it in this high-tension atmosphere. She quickly took a massive gulp of milk, and because of that, her mouth was completely covered in white foam. In the old man's eyes, that clumsy action looked freaking adorable. She looked exactly like a little old lady with a fluffy white beard. Like a doting father, he wiped the stray foam off his daughter's cheek and ate it, leaving the servants unable to believe their own eyes. Everyone's mind was exploding. Why does he look more and more like a doting dummy dad? But it only made the little girl question her existence. What's wrong with you? We're talking about something important. Who possessed you? But when she turned around, she saw the servants looking at her with sparkling, teary eyes that were glowing with devotion. She had a massive question mark over her head. What the heck? Meanwhile, the system was pinging away. The Duke's servants and butler recognize your grace. Above everyone's head, the loyalty numbers were constantly jumping up by plus 100. Making her suddenly feel a deep pity for these people. Truly living under this demon Duke is an extreme sport. Thanks to her influence in the Ferriton family skyrocketing, she received a hot bonus of 5,000 gold. Seeing the money jingle into her inventory made her face light up with pure joy. The servants immediately fell for the act, whispering that the lady must be happy because she's sitting in the Duke's pampered lap. But of course, nothing that heartwarming was happening. Happy my foot! It's the gold. After a grueling day of non-stop social warfare, she was totally exhausted and collapsed face down on the bed. The need a refreshment mission had automatically expired, and after calculating the stats, the system displayed a mission failed notice. She was half asleep, but suddenly woke up completely crawling up to interrogate this crappy system. She clearly dominated Clety and kicked her out of the house. It should have been an absolute success. Though the Duke had blurred her memory with magic, making the details fuzzy, she was certain she had crushed that mission. But now, facing a system penalty, she clutched her head in a panic, fearing the punishment might literally erase her from existence. Who would have thought it'd be a flat soda penalty? The system was absolutely fuming at her. Repent while you serve your sentence. This penalty will cause the player's buffs to vanish at random. She remained surprisingly chill though, since she had no clue what kind of power that trash system had even buffed her with. Then, while rolling around on her bed, she locked eyes with that stony, familiar face. Her old man's handsome face appeared, though in her dazed state, the background looked like a steaming pile of buffalo dung. Usually, one look at his terrifying mug would make her want to pee her pants, but right now, she just wanted to rot in bed like a lazy sloth. The flat soda penalty had clearly nerfed her motivation, so she forced herself to sit up with a groan. Because, as it turned out, her adult logic reincarnation buff had officially evaporated. She scanned the room left and right, but couldn't spot anything unusual or broken. Suddenly, her tiny stomach let out a roar from the depths of hell. She was both famished and incredibly sleepy. She crawled toward the Duke with a perfectly innocent of all charges face, shamelessly demanding num-nums. A massive question mark appeared over the Duke's stone-cold face as he repeated, "What in the world is num-nums?" The little girl beamed and smacked her hand down on his thigh with a heavy thud. "Papa, I want cookies." That smack echoed through the silent room, and the realization made her face turn ghostly pale. It turns out the buff she lost was her common sense. She could no longer suppress her impulses like in her past life. Her entire body began to tremble. Now, every time a buff was stripped away, she regressed into a child acting exactly her physical age, a total brat. She didn't expect that silver-haired demon bastard of a system to play this dirty. The buffs disappear at random with absolutely zero way to manage the chaos. She could only weep while frantically rubbing the spot she just slapped, praying her old man wouldn't execute her on the spot. Then he suddenly inquired how she liked the ancient book he had gifted her earlier. After hearing his daughter enthusiastically affirm that the book looked quite pretty, he was hit with a huge question mark since it was a tattered ancient mess. He began to stare at her intensely. She became flustered, a wave of guilt hitting her for having magically reskinned the family heirloom. But when she turned to face her old man's breathtakingly sharp visuals, she found herself completely powerless against that sparkling, noble aura. Unable to control her damn body, she reached up to pat the Duke's head while chirping like a bird. "I made it so pretty, she babbled, letting her confidence get a bit too carried away. "I made it gorgeous. Papa should say thank you to me." She quickly bowed to demonstrate proper manners, waiting expectantly for the Duke to praise her. Her smile was more dazzling than the stars, making his lips involuntarily curl into a smirk. He was genuinely curious to see how she had decorated a sacred artifact to make it so beautiful, and reached for a look. The smile on her face instantly froze. She was paralyzed by the realization. Oh crap, I'm absolutely cooked. She broke into a cold sweat as her soul prepared to exit her body, waving goodbye before she got caught in the blast zone. She had no idea how to explain that the book was now worlds apart from its original state. She decided to just confess, since kids who admit their mistakes shouldn't be punished, right? But suddenly, her goldfish brain remembered a terrifyingly important detail: that book was priceless. It was a legendary tome from the first Duke. Not only had she swiped it, she had completely transformed it. This was a disaster. Just the thought of being loathed by the staff and having the old man give her the cold shoulder made her freeze up, desperately trying to keep it together to fix the situation. But when she saw her old man's murderous aura as he towered over her, he looked absolutely horrifying. It made her jump, and her fear finally boiled over into a full-blown crying fit. In a state of total panic, she shrieked in denial, "It wasn't me! I didn't ruin your stupid book!" The butler could only sigh in exasperation because his lord's sheer intensity was making the kid cry her eyes out, so he urged the Duke to go comfort her. But who would have thought the butler would later find the Duke acting like a sad boy, staring gloomily out the window? The nosy butler wondered if some catastrophic event had befallen the youngest lady. Noticing the Duke's uncharacteristically somber mood, the butler awkwardly asked if she had cried a lot. But instead of a direct answer, the dummy dad posed a heartbreaking question. "Do I look ugly to her?" This rattled the man so much he couldn't believe his ears. Eyes widening as if they might pop, he thought a ghost had possessed his lord, so he tremblingly asked for clarification. The reason for such a pathetic question was because earlier the little girl had thrown a tantrum and wailed, "You're not my papa isn't scary like this." She just kept thrashing around on the bed, wailing and throwing a tantrum, trying to claim the book was unharmed. But he kept terrifying her by squinting those predatory beast-like eyes. That's why she felt so wounded, she flat out denied this father's existence, declaring she only acknowledges a handsome, non-scary father. But seeing that flawlessly aesthetic, handsome face right in front of her made her even more triggered. She kept acting out, inventing more wild lore that her father owns a diamond mine, and shrieked, "My father would sacrifice his soul for his precious daughter. My father worships me." Every single word she spat out left him completely paralyzed and shell-shocked, while the system's influence forced her emotions to spiral, making her scream, "I hate you, Dad." This caused the old man's hands, which were about to reach out in comfort, to freeze instantly. Facing a face smeared with tears and eyes overflowing with resentment, she declared he was a total stranger to her. It felt like a bolt from the blue. He completely crumbled his eyes, reflecting massive emotional damage. But while he was spiraling over the rejection, he overheard the boisterous, chaotic laughter of the maids. Seeing Anna and the others clutching scraps of paper and giggling like schoolgirls, his nosy side took over and he went to investigate the commotion. It scared them out of their wits. They frantically scrambled to hide the drawings behind their backs, their faces turning pale with that suspicious, caught red-handed behavior. This only piqued his curiosity further. He reached out his hand and commanded Anna to surrender whatever she was hiding. Having the paper in his grasp, one would expect his face to be full of, but unexpectedly, a rare expression of pure bewilderment washed over his face. The white paper only featured a sketch of a black, red, and yellow blob. He genuinely thought these people had suffered severe brain damage. Who knew Anna would shyly start flexing the masterpiece? It was nothing special, just a custom drawing by the young lady. They couldn't hide their smug faces as they low-key showed off a whole gallery of other sketches. Everyone had a piece. Some even boasted a whole collection now. That's a real flex. The servants were all chirping and buzzing, assuming that since the Duke is her father, he must have a mountain of them. It was like a lethal arrow piercing the Duke's pride, making him mumble in despair. But immediately, his aura became extremely dark and dangerous because he hadn't received a single damn thing from his daughter. This left the three maids so shook they couldn't even close their mouths. Oh boy, they just dug their own graves with that brag. Before them now stood the most pathetic father in the universe, discarded by his daughter while everyone else was being showered with love. Meanwhile, she was so miserable she wanted to bury her head in a pillow. Thanks to that cursed penalty, she just wanted to vanish in a hole. How could she even face him? So they held an emergency secret meeting with the short-haired maid leading the intel. The butler feared she would cry herself sick, so he suggested the old man go comfort her. But since he was a total noob at being a dad, he was a bit clumsy and triggered a tantrum instead. Plus, every single staff member got a custom drawing, while her biological extra of a dad got absolutely nothing. After summarizing the evidence, the short-haired maid, acting like the legendary detective Sherlock Holmes, declared she definitely hates his guts. This made the entire group immediately fear for their mortal lives. They desperately tried to muffle that girl's mouth. "We're all gonna get executed because of you." Anna had no choice but to step up and mediate this cold war between father and daughter, asking if she had said anything else. Just hearing her resentful words declaring that she didn't just despise him, but refused to even acknowledge him as her parent felt like a lightning strike to their collective souls. They immediately went into interrogation mode. "Didn't you hug and soothe the lady? Did you even smile affectionately?" Which made him freeze up. He thought mindlessly, is that even a requirement? But then he recalled the feeling of holding his daughter in his arms, feeling her as a living being with soft breath and cheeks as chubby as a pufferfish. Just the memory of that smile had turned his cold heart into literal mush. All the servants knew how much he actually adored her, so they encouraged him to go see his precious again to make things right. But after brooding for a while with a deadpan expression, he suddenly blurted out to them, "Do any of you know what num-nums are?" Before they could even process the whiplash of those words coming from the demon Duke's mouth, he started asking about cookies with a straight face. It sent a massive shockwave of confusion through the entire mansion. On her end, she felt like she was 5 years old but had aged a century. She was truly on the highway to doom for beefing with the Demon King, but suddenly she looked up to see the old man at the door. He swallowed his pride then, with a face that didn't show a single flicker of emotion. He spoke. "Let us consume some num-nums together." This left her completely flabbergasted. What did I just hear? Is he possessed by a ghost? In the end, she could only obediently lounge in her dad's lap while being hand-fed premium treats, enjoying the luxury to the max. But she was absolutely floored when the old man suddenly started using formal royal honorifics with his own daughter. "Is it to your liking, milady?" Making her go into total shock. questioning her entire existence to the point of dropping her cookie. Who the hell is this guy supposed to be? Seeing his daughter's bewildered expression, he immediately consulted the cheat sheet the servants had drafted to see if he'd executed the move correctly. As for her, her brain was still buffering and refusing to process the data. SOS. Someone save me from this cringe. Then the Duke abruptly brought up the Marquis and his daughter, vowing that they would never darken his doorstep again. Hearing those words, it finally clicked. Dad was actually worried about her, which explains his earlier visit. Even though she had no clue when that silver-haired troll would prank her and wipe her buffs, reverting her to a brat. She still summoned the courage to speak her mind, admitting she was wrong and doesn't actually loathe him. But when he pressed, "Is there anything else you want to tell me?" it felt like a lethal arrow piercing her soul. A flood of questions like, "Why did you abandon me? And why didn't you find me sooner?" surged through her mind instantly. But she forced a radiant smile and chirped, "It's nothing," even though the facade immediately crumbled. When her old man pushed further, asking how many years he had left her there, she tried to cut him off. She tried to rationalize that there must have been a reason or that it was all fine, but he commanded her to never think like that again. The Duke's face now betrayed a pitiful amount of agony over the catastrophic mistakes he had personally made. Seeing him so vulnerable broke her walls, and her tears began to fall as she finally unleashed years of bottled resentment. Like a wounded child, she interrogated him. "Why did you leave me? Do you know how terrified I was? I missed you so much." Each word was a jagged knife stabbing directly into his heart. He couldn't mask the raw agony etching his face. He reached out to pull his little girl into a protective embrace and whispered softly, "I was wrong. I'm so sorry, child." The warmth she thought was a myth now enveloped her tiny frame, making her look truly content. She finally had a loving father and a real home. Meanwhile, as the staff tried to deliver their reports, they were suddenly cut off by a persistent beep, beep sound. They tried to raise their voices, but that electronic sound kept drowning them out, leaving them utterly baffled. Where in the world was that noise even coming from? Suddenly, the sound shifted to a piercing beep, and his eyes instantly ignited. He immediately hurled his pen aside, sending the servants into a panicked startle. They feared their heads were about to roll just for annoying him. But unexpectedly, the Duke just vaulted down from the second floor and strutted away. It turns out the racket was from the squeaky shoes of the little girl racing through the garden, leaving the staff praying in the corner. They expected a bloodbath, but instead his massive arms simply scooped the little girl up into a tender embrace with absolute care. With a rare, brilliant smile they thought was a myth, he looked at her with pure, unadulterated affection. This time they were truly blinded by the shock. What the hell? Who is this man? And so the meeting commenced, while he continued to dote on his daughter, letting she claim his lap as her throne. Before starting, he donned a deathly serious expression to announce shocking news, demanding everyone remain on high alert. Everyone tensed up and swallowed hard to brace for the impact, but who knew the top priority was actually the audio feedback from her souls. A steady tempo signifies she's out of harm's way. But should there be a prolonged shrill beep, indicating she's terrified, then every soul present must immediately deploy into full-scale war mode to safeguard his precious daughter. Under his glacial lethal glare that silently vowed to end anyone who let a single hair on her head be ruffled, these elite vassals who usually lived for the crown were suddenly electrified, ready to throw their lives away for the little sprout, swearing a blood oath to protect the lady or perish. Upon hearing the suggestion to scrub her name from a high society gala invitation due to its complexity, she suddenly recalled a glaring void. She reached up and gave his regal sleeve a persistent tug. The terrifying Duke instantly melted into a doting father, obediently bowing his head to catch her tiny whisper. But the moment she asked what her own name actually was, the warmth on his face was instantly snuffed out. He wasn't the only one paralyzed by the sheer weight of her question. A wave of profound bewilderment swept through the room, etching itself onto every vassal's face. The realization that she didn't know her name or even her own age caused the room's atmosphere to turn leaden and suffocating. That singular innocent inquiry brought the entire high-stakes meeting to a jarring halt. For the first time, she witnessed the true, unrestrained, murderous intent radiating from her old man. The whispers from before echoed through the hall. How could the lady not know her own identity? That bastard Marquis Tarinka. What had he been calling the lady all those years? Her expression darkened. At the Marquis' hellhole, no one used a name. They only spat at her like she was filth or a vermin, calling her trash or useless. Gretty's venomous slurs were still seared into her soul. Illegitimate brat, family disgrace, unwanted mongrel. Looking at her dad's distorted face now, she recognized that look of impending doom. His features were twisted in a paroxysm of pure rage upon learning she hadn't received a single copper of support from the marquis. Sensing her father's inner turmoil, she whispered that she felt neither shame nor pity regarding her forgotten name. She wasn't that lonely girl anymore, and she no longer mourned being unwanted. His devotion was her world now, and she radiated a blissful smile. Witnessing her radiance, he discarded his lethal aura and softened gently, pinching her chubby cheeks to reveal the truth. That her real name is Ratisa. To her it sounded like an exotic foreign melody that she had never encountered, yet it resonated with a strange, haunting familiarity deep within her soul. As if she had heard of that name before, whispered with love in her mother's embrace. Finally hearing her true identity called out, she affectionately clung to her father's arm after waking from a peaceful slumber. Suddenly, she jolted awake in a panic, staring at a scene that was an absolute catastrophe. Tears and snot were unceremoniously smeared all over her father's expensive shirt. One glance at his face sent her scrambling 5 steps back in sheer terror. As she questioned her life choices, how on earth was she snoring in the Demon Duke's arms, leaving a trail of tears, snot, and drool all over the man? The cringeworthy bury-me-alive memories of when her buffs were purged and she regressed into a brat flooded back, recalling how she refused to let him leave for work, whining and threatening. "If you don't tuck me in, I'll literally hate you forever, Dad." She had gone full spoiled princess mode, but now she was drowning in humiliation and dread, and there was nowhere left to run when she saw him peeling off the soiled garment. To change into a fresh set of clothes, she instinctively blurted out, "Does it hurt, Papa?" pointing to a jagged scar on his hip. He froze instantly before denying the sensation, claiming he's long been immune to pain. Without a word, he used his massive palm to shield his daughter's eyes, terrified she'd find the mark hideous and loathe him. But she pulled his hand away, recognizing this as a badge of a duke who bled on the battlefield to shield his nation. She crawled directly toward him and blew on the scar with all her heart. This time it was the duke's turn to have a massive question mark, not comprehending the girl's actions as the wound had long since scarred over and ceased to ache years ago. But who knew he had such a worth her weight in gold daughter? Since she couldn't comfort him back then, she was banishing all his past agony to the shadow realm right now. To Gatkis. Even knowing the physical wound was closed, she understood that no scar exists without having once inflicted a world of pain. This made her father go stiff. He had endured that suffering before, with eyes constantly fixed on him like poisoned daggers, overflowing with malice and rage as if they intended to devour his very soul. After being touched by his little daughter's warmth, the Duke finally learned how to reciprocate that care. He recalled when he first brought her back to the estate. His daughter was burning with a fever so intense she had lost consciousness. A father's heart was lacerated with guilt, but he remained powerless while Ratisa was under the impression he didn't give a damn. In reality, the Duke galloped back from the imperial palace every single day just to steal a fleeting glance at his daughter. He always had to vanish in a hurry, so their paths never actually crossed while she was conscious. He's a duke who never misses his mark, yet in his desperate haste to see her, he took a hit from an assassin, leaving that permanent scar on his waist. All because he was frantic to bring her from the marquis's hellhole back to the safety of his own home. Hearing the truth made Ratisa's heart skip a beat. She had never known her father was off at war, only that she had been discarded and forgotten. Hearing his daughter's heartbreak, he gritted his teeth in bitterness and whispered an apology. Knowing she wasn't abandoned, she forgave him, instantly realizing he had risked death on the front lines for the realm. Everything was perfect, until her father suddenly mentioned her lack of magical affinity, causing her mood to plummet instantly, as if she were free-falling into a dark, bottomless abyss. She squeezed her eyes shut, paralyzed by a single thought, was she truly not this man's biological child after all? But suddenly, he expressed profound gratitude that Ratisa possessed no magical talent, being just a precious normal child. Magic is a lethal, double-edged sword. Her older brothers couldn't endure its overwhelming pressure, and they nearly perished, leaving only 3 survivors. When she was born, he yearned to stay by her side, but duty called him to the slaughter. By chance, Marquis Terenka appeared, volunteering to raise her in the Duke's absence. Though he mistrusted the man who already had a daughter like Clety, he feared Ratisa was too fragile to handle a sudden magical awakening and needed protection. That's why he made the fatal error of trusting a wolf with a lamb, feeling secure on the front lines, while deceptive letters reported his daughter was flourishing. She never realized that the only reason she was sent away was to keep her safe while the Duke's mansion was a battlefield. Receiving a tender head pat alongside her father's soul-bearing apology, she could no longer suppress the flood of emotions. Clearly, that snake of a marquis caused all this misery. So why was her father the one begging for forgiveness? Faced with his vow that he never once entertained the thought of discarding his own flesh and blood, she realized there truly hadn't been a single second where she was abandoned. She gripped those warm, calloused hands, seeing the man before her was truly her biological father, not some distant stranger. Her hands trembled with relief, her eyes brimming with unshed tears. "Even if I have no magic, you're still my papa, right?" After receiving his firm nod, she couldn't hold back the dam anymore and collapsed into a fit of weeping, sobbing uncontrollably. In her past life, she was just a lonely orphan, which was why she foolishly made a deal with that silver-haired demon to find a home. Now I can finally fulfill my dream of having a real family to cherish and a home to return to. After discovering she's 4 and her birthday is in October, she realized she missed it. But the old man declared that from now on, her birthdays must be celebrated more grandly than even the royal families. He had already prepared a mountain of treasures. Even that extravagant dress Clety flaunted earlier was actually a custom gift he had meticulously commissioned for Retisa. Just imagining how that little parasite had the sheer audacity to steal his daughter's rightful dress made his murderous aura flare up with lethal intensity. But she didn't mind, because she was overwhelmed with joy, knowing that even in the heat of war, her dad always kept his little girl in his heart and prepared for every single milestone. However, hearing Retisa admit she thought he despised her very existence made him pause with a massive confused question mark. Though she feared asking about her mother, she recalled the marquis' lies about an affair, and her mother dying in labor, leading her biological father to discard her like trash. Terrified yet desperate for the truth, she summoned every ounce of courage to ask if her mother truly became a star in the sky the moment she was born. Learning that these poisonous lies originated from Marquis Terenka only fueled the Duke's rage to a boiling point. His gaze turned predatory, looking as if he were ready to harvest that man's soul right then and there. Attempting to suppress his volcanic anger, he reached for Retisa and pulled her firmly onto his lap. He began to explain that on the day of her birth, her mother didn't succumb to a difficult labor at all. In fact, she was healthy enough to hold her, and the name Retisa was her mother's final gift. Hearing this, her eyes sparkled. She wasn't a curse, and she suddenly felt a strange warmth, loving her name even more. Fearing his daughter still felt like a sinner, he reminded her that her birthday is a momentous occasion that is absolutely worth a global celebration. Retisa could feel the rough, battle-worn calluses on the dry hand cradling hers. But it was the hand that radiated the most warmth in the world, so she quickly extended her pinky to seal a sacred promise. From this moment on, the two would forever be father and daughter, bound by an unbreakable bond. Seeing how lost his daughter was in her own adorable world, he doted on her, but who knew that cute-as-a-button face would suddenly be replaced by the hardened, boss babe expression of a middle-aged auntie. With dead serious energy, she insisted they had to stamp and sign the deal for it to be legally binding. It was a legendary once-in-a-lifetime sight, the terrifying demon duke actually pinky swearing with his tiny daughter. While she was satisfied the contract was sealed, the old man's hand was redder than a monkey's butt. Who does this kid take after that makes her so insanely strong? Then he suddenly recalled her earlier hiring criteria and brought it up again with a smirk. If I weren't this handsome or lacked a diamond mine, would I still qualify to be your father? Leaving her speechless and panicking, clutching her head in shame, she really had gone through a full delusional episode like that. But there was no need to stress, because this duke isn't just a top-tier visual on the outside. He's also loaded with generational wealth on the inside. He fits his daughter's recruitment requirements perfectly. It made her bow her head in pure admiration. Her father may lack modesty, but he certainly has a confidence in spades. When the meeting resumed, the staff were totally riled up, refusing to let Marquis Terenka off the hook for another second. Embezzling funds and scamming the nobility could almost be overlooked in this world. But making his precious daughter's life so miserable she didn't even know her own name, he's dead meat. Under the Duke's ruthless orders, Marquis Terenka's capital has been nuked. Smart investors are jumping ship, and the industry tycoons have completely blacklisted him. No use seeking help from his kin. This era is defined by cold hard cash. It's time for the wealthy bourgeoisie to trample over the bankrupt nobility. He wanted to dismantle him piece by piece so that the snake could experience the ultimate agony of a slow descent into the abyss. But for the crimes committed against Retisa, even total ruin wasn't enough. He was determined to make his life a living hell. Retisa was just about to drift into a peaceful slumber when she was suddenly jolted awake by a ping-ping from the system loud enough to shatter her eardrums. She sat bolt upright and started cursing it out. Hey, I'm only 4. I'm at the age where I need sleep to grow. If I end up being a shorty, are you taking the blame? Suddenly, the system popped up. Revenge is served. Does she even have the heart to sleep now? Duke Ferriton is plotting against the Marquis's brat, but before she could celebrate, that damn system issued an absurd demand she must carry out the revenge personally. The dialogue box kept spamming, she has to do it herself. It scared her so much she felt nerfed. What do you expect from a 4-year-old? But the system was heartless and dropped the mission, reclaimed the child support funds stolen by the marquis. Easier said than done. She was completely dumbfounded. How on earth was she supposed to punish that old snake? But immediately she saw the penalty. Rejecting the quest would jack up the flat soda buff wipe chance, while completing it would finally lift the curse. Realizing it was her only shot, she flipped into boss mode, determined to speedrun this mission. Accepting the quest, she pulled out the sealed tome to trigger the novel summoning skill. She wanted to hijack the power of the Fel from I seduced 10 men in a reverse harem. The book glowed and slammed shut. Did the gotcha pull work? She scanned the room frantically. This was a novel with 10 male leads, just like the title suggested. Only amateurs choose the female lead. I'll take the whole harem weight. I reject them all. The system pinged. Use just and cut to extract the FL's ability. At your rank, you can pull 5 abilities. Instantly, winged crystal hearts fluttered everywhere, hovering around her for the final selection. But it was all for show. There's no way the system is that generous. She could only pull one of the 5 hearts. Familiar with the grind, Retisa decisively snatched a blue crystal heart. It was the ability, I'm not flirting, I just see your true intentions. The name was Mid, but it let her read moods for 3 hours. Basically, it's a mind-reading hack, but since the novel was unfinished, the skill was buggy and limited, sending her into a state of desperate frustration. I really want to curse out that silver-haired guy's entire lineage. If the author dropped the series, he should have given a heads up, but since I already picked it, I'm stuck with the grind. Now that the die is cast, I might as well go all in. I quickly launched my investigation. Meanwhile, whispers that Duke Ferriton hadn't invested a single dime in any project reached the ears of other investors who immediately stormed Marquis Terenka's estate demanding a full refund. But the snake was prepared. He smugly pulled a black card out of his pocket. It was the official check sent by the Duke for Retisa's child support, which he shamelessly used as proof to fuel his massive scam. Seeing that legitimate high-tier signature in his hand made them hesitate instantly because there's no way that mark was a forgery. He seized the moment to gaslight the crowd. As investors, would you really let others be more successful than you? Successfully manipulating their greed. They began to suspect the Duke wanted all the profit for himself, so he was spreading fake news and misinformation to scare them off. Plus, the Ferriton bloodline was notorious for being ruthless, cruel, and incredibly devious. This made the naive mob believe him completely, thinking it wasn't out of character for someone like the Duke to weaponize lies. But the Marquis was stunned into silence when a voice suddenly demanded he produce the contract proving the partnership. Though caught off guard, he quickly started capping, claiming a contract isn't something a mere third party can just inspect. He then glared toward Duke Ferriton's side, playing the victim, who had been slandered, and demanding a confrontation. He was playing hard to get, making the investors reconsider whether to double down or pull their funds. He strutted out of the room alone, unable to suppress his smirk. Manipulating these brainless fools was way too easy. Honestly, it's an easy game. Suddenly, a frantic servant informed him that a high-profile guest had arrived to visit. It was none other than the young lady of the Ferriton household, Retisa. It was a total shock to his system. The Marquis looked annoyed that Retisa dared show up alone, but he immediately ordered her to be taken to the greenhouse, unable to hide his smugness. He assumed Retisa had been kicked out by the Duke and came crawling back to his estate. He turned to leave, telling them to let the old men bicker and report back to him, and immediately that sleazy brain of his cooked up a devious plan. He was going to use Retisa as a pawn to squeeze even more capital out of the Duke. As long as the Duke increased the funding, he could easily debunk the rumors about the reclaimed investment. As he approached, he was already deluding himself into thinking Retisa would be head over heels with joy, crying in the greenhouse and begging to return to his superficial, toxic household. But the moment he shoved the door open, he wore the exact same dumbfounded expression as his daughter. Standing before him was a stunningly cute little lady decked out in elite luxury brands. She was a far cry from the filthy, lowly girl he remembered crushing under his feet. He was so shocked he couldn't even close his mouth. Retisa flashed a dazzling smile and got straight to the point. I'm here for the bag. Cough up the money, old man. Activating skill. It's not that I'm a flirt. I just have an all-seeing eye for your feelings. Targeting Marquis Terenka. Target locked and loaded. Hearing her demand made him seethe with rage, his eyes glowing in the dark like a predatory beast trying to intimidate a child. He immediately cut Retisa off and roared at her while the status window was busy. Accurately reading his emotions, the man was currently fuming with pure hatred. Seeing the guy overstep the red-haired guardian behind her, immediately wanted to teach him a lesson. "You dog, how dare you bark at her?" But he was stopped by her small hand and a look of fiery determination. She was determined to handle this old geezer herself and finish the mission perfectly. Seeing the cute-as-a-button girl in charge made the red-haired guy forget his anger, his heart skipping a beat. Rotisa continued to pressure the man, demanding back every cent her dad had poured in for her support. This made his blood boil, and he started pointing and cursing at her for being ungrateful, barking that she'd be ant food if he hadn't raised her. After calculating for a bit, she realized she couldn't waste this mind-reading buff, so she went straight for the mana mine and its mining rights. She was certain they were bought with her stolen funds. Caught in his own trap, he shouted even louder, insisting the Duke had invested that for him. But he slipped up, essentially confirming that he purchased those mana stones using Duke Feraton's gold. The system immediately began roasting him. The Marquis is currently looking for a hole to crawl into and die. Because he was being read like a book by a toddler, Big L. "You're such a noob." But when she shifted the subject to the child support money, he seemed somewhat relieved and forced a crooked smile lying through his teeth that he never received a single dime for her care. Scanning his pathetic status window, Rotisa realized that the thing making him the most anxious wasn't actually the embezzled support money. She immediately circled back to the mana mine to test his reaction. Just as expected, he overreacted. It was clear he was incredibly uneasy. Having found his weak point, she played innocent and jabbed him about baiting nobles to invest in the mana business under the Feraton name. She successfully made him flustered and livid, and he tried to dismiss her by snapping that kids shouldn't stick their noses into adult business. Little did he know he was falling right into Rotisa's master trap. With her asking why he was suddenly so heated since only the guilty are jumpy, he became more and more visibly unsettled. The final blow, even a child could see through his lies, he was clearly trying to bury something dark. Doubled down, it left him completely catatonic and frozen like a marble statue. He scrambled to fabricate an excuse, but his entire frame shuddered uncontrollably as he fought to suppress his mounting rage. Meanwhile, Rotisa channeled her father's ruthless energy and backed him into a corner. She wasn't about to let him off the hook. While he was spiraling in a panic, one of his lackeys suddenly scurried in and whispered something frantic into his ear. This left him visibly rattled, and he beat a hasty retreat, but not before barking orders to his servants to toss her into the chicken coop. This triggered the red-haired guardian behind her, who glared at him with a lethal, murderous aura. "You dog, what did you just bark?" While Rotisa couldn't restrain him, her own face contorted in terror. If she botched the mission now, she'd definitely revert into a helpless baby. Facing a literal life-or-death crisis, she'd rather be a loyalist than a drooling infant. The red-haired servant suddenly dropped a hint. There's a swarm of investors here waiting for that marquis to decide whether they should pull their capital or double down. This served as her eureka moment, revealing the key to the situation. She immediately scrambled to head over and join the fun. While the Marquis was busy gloating because the investors had decided to stay on board, grinning like a greedy hyena, his ultimate natural enemy suddenly crashed the party. It was Rotisa calling for a total halt to the proceedings. Ignoring his visual shock, she played the role of a refined little lady, lifting her skirt in a perfect curtsy. "A pleasure to meet you. I am Rotisa of House Feraton." This left all the wealthy investor Ajusis absolutely mesmerized by her sheer cuteness. The Marquis, however, looked like he was about to wet himself in a panic, shrieking for her to stop meddling in adult business. But surprisingly, they didn't mind her presence at all because the girl was just too cute as a button, a rare jewel of the Feraton house. She instantly turned on the charm. She shyly buttered them up, claiming they were such brilliant elites that they would surely value even the humble perspective of a child. She successfully melted their icy hearts, and they couldn't hide the smug, satisfied smirks on their faces. She went straight for the jugular, bringing up the capital invested in the mana stone mine. Those mana stones are the classic mana-infused fossils that are staples in every high fantasy novel. But in this specific region, the discovered mana stones were suspiciously hollow and worthless. However, with her razor-sharp intuition, she knew that whenever Duke Feraton puts his name on something, the mana stones are guaranteed to be top-tier and overflowing with power, a 100% win rate. The moment she analyzed the situation, Rotisa flatly denied that her old man had ever participated in this shady investment. The Marquis, in a desperate frenzy, slammed a checkbook onto the table, claiming this was the smoking gun for his excuse. But Rotisa tossed out a casual question. "With my dad's god-tier radar that beats any machine, why wouldn't he just mine it all himself and keep the bag? Why share the profit with outsiders?" This left every man in the room stunned. Why didn't we think of that? But then a major hurdle came up: the colossal mining costs. Logically, it wasn't a cheap venture and required massive funding. They assumed that was the only reason he sought investors. With a look of pure innocence, she didn't just accidentally, but strategically flexed her old man. He's not just a visual king, he's filthy rich with a money pit deeper than a dungeon, so why would he be short on cash? This left the marquis flabbergasted. What the hell is a money pit? And then she delivered the final blow, pointing directly at his lying face, with a savage playful wink. Embezzlement. However, raw cash can't solve everything, as mining operations require official state permits and royal approval. Even if it were all legitimate, what exactly would Retisa's old man be lacking besides money? Look at her smug face, pretending to be clueless as she asked, "Our family literally has nothing but endless gold." So why would he invite investors when he could just gatekeep all the profit? Those sparkling eyes looked harmless, yet every word she uttered was like a jagged blade stabbing the marquis, making him want to cough up a gallon of blood. With the ultimate follow-up, why didn't he just accept the Duke's investment alone? To maximize his own cut. It left him frozen like a statue, screaming every flowery curse word imaginable in his head. Before he could blink, the checkbook in his hand had migrated into Rotisa's tiny, treacherous palm. This scared the absolute daylight out of him. He panicked so violently his face contorted as he lunged to snatch it back from her. His complexion turned ghostly pale, as if every drop of blood had drained from his body. But before his fingers could even graze the paper, it was snatched away by a furious investor who shot him a threatening glare. "Bark one more time and see what happens." But the second he flipped open the checkbook, he was struck by pure, unadulterated shock, because the funds Duke Ferriton had provided in the past year alone were enough to fund 10 mines. The other two were so rattled they jumped out of their seats, and she quickly poured a gallon of gasoline on the fire, maintaining that same angelic smile. "Well, obviously, my dad would never give you uncles such a pocket change amount." The status window kept pinging. The marquis's expression now looked like he wanted to chew Rotisa up and swallow her whole. But she continued to dance on his grave, constantly jabbing him. "Wait, why do you even need investments anyway?" Acting all confused. "Is it because you want to sell mana and then split the profit with everyone? You truly are a saint and a generous soul." This finally forced the investors to face the brutal truth: there was no damn investment from House Ferriton at all. Otherwise, he wouldn't be so broke that he had to beg for capital from them in the first place. Rotisa quickly snitched, exposing how she used to witness a constant stream of high-profile guests rotating through the estate. It turns out they were all just fodder for the mana mining operation, but not a single stone actually contained a drop of mana. He simply intended to exploit those people and those worthless pebbles to turn a profit, offloading the entire investment risk onto them. When the truth inevitably breaks that it's all a scam, her dad, whom the marquis used as a puppet partner, would surely be implicated in this fraud. Having binged Detective Conan for over 180 minutes, Rotisa declared the case closed. There is only one truth. She immediately thrust her hand toward the fuming, speechless marquis. "Cough up the bag, old man." In the end, he had no choice but to surrender and agree to repay every cent of the child support he swindled from Duke Ferriton. Everything was unfolding according to Rotisa's master plan. She even slickly demanded full ownership and the mana mining rights. But he immediately barked back, claiming the effort of raising her for 4 years should be compensation enough. With wide, mock innocent eyes, her words continued to jab him. "Does uncle have no shame offering such a pathetic pittance?" She immediately flashed a dazzling smile and waved her hand dismissively. "Oh my, how can you be this shameless? You have zero dignity, right?" That savage remark completely snapped his final thread of sanity. The system immediately updated his status. The marquis is experiencing extreme vertigo, so livid he might literally cough up blood. Sitting with this brat for a second longer might actually trigger a heart attack. He wearily clutched his head and folded just to satisfy her. But little did he know Rotisa was a step ahead. She rattled off an itemized list of every stolen profit and expense, demanding total restitution, a list longer than a legendary scroll. It was a total knockout. He looked like he had physically died inside. Finally, Rotisa successfully fleeced the bastard. "From now on, I'm a certified sugar mommy, hehehe." Suddenly, the system pinged personal revenge mission success reward 3,000 gold. The bounty instantly hit her balance, making her grin from ear to ear with greed. But of course, this trash system didn't keep its word. Even though the mission ended, the flat soda penalty was still ticking. The 3 investors from earlier approached her with curious expressions. Instantly, her brat buff evaporated and she shifted back into angelic child mode, flashing a heart-melting smile. Seeing the adorable girl standing before them, those men couldn't help but want to reach out and pinch her chubby cheeks. Just one squeeze. They approached her because of one massive question: why would the Duke give money to the marquis without a contract? Rotisa perkily raised her hand. I know, and shyly whispered the reason. Because Papa loves me, obviously. This made the silver-haired uncle freeze in place. Wait, did I just hear that correctly? While the other two were completely overwhelmed by her sheer, unadulterated cuteness. Truly, no one could resist a girl this precious yet sharp. Even the stern, white-haired uncle tried to lure her with candy. The black-haired guy next to him was absolutely shook. After the red-haired servant reminded her to head back before her old man panicked, Rotisa energetically waved a bubbly goodbye to them. Seeing that display of cuteness, the brown-haired uncle felt a strange sense of déjà vu about the child. It seemed that during a previous visit to the marquis' estate, he had glimpsed a grubby, neglected Rotisa living like a common servant. He quickly brushed the thought aside. Surely he was mistaken, as the two versions of the child were polar opposites. To them, her recovery was miraculous, like a plant flourishing in a rich soil. Rotisa was a seed of infinite potential, and they were eager to see what kind of powerhouse she would grow up to be, and if she could truly lead the family. As soon as they returned, Red Hair started sobbing with pride for his lady. If she had possessed magic, she would have definitely obliterated that guy. He was like a doting grandma watching her grandchild level up. He wouldn't stop bawling, making her panic as she tried to comfort him. That heartwarming scene was immediately caught by her daughter-obsessed dad. He looked on with pure, unmasked jealousy. "Looks like you two are getting awfully cozy, aren't you?" The servant was instantly scared out of his wits, losing all composure and stuttering, My lord." Seeing Red Hair so rattled, he forgot how to speak a human language. Rotisa, worried for him, tried to soothe him by pressing her dumpling cheek against his hand. But that only made Red Hair spiral further, crying a literal river. "Oh boy, I'm cooked. Goodbye, world." Because of the scorched earth gaze of the old man standing right behind him. "How dare you touch my daughter, you little punk!" He immediately snatched the kid by the head. And just like that, he unceremoniously dragged him away to his doom. While Rotisa, the innocent cause of the chaos, just sat in the corner press F to pay respects for him, please. Suddenly, a crowd of servants rushed out to greet her, enthusiastically welcoming their lady home. Seeing them so hyped, preparing her favorite dishes for her return made her heart feel strangely fuzzy. She beamed because this was finally a home that waited for her. As they sat for tea, the Duke watched her, but his mind was a battlefield. Raising a daughter is like guarding a vault of gold. Leave her for a second, and some random is already touching her cheeks. He could only vent his burning frustration by punching an imaginary wall, making the servant beside him incredibly tense. But who knew this dad's daughter complex would hit this hard? He was perpetually stressed about the safety of her dumpling cheeks. And it was as if he could completely override another person's biological instinct for personal space. Watching the Lord dote on his daughter while incessantly stroking her hair left the young man speechless. We call that a terminal daughter complex, sir. Seriously, how much longer am I forced to witness this nauseating father-daughter fluff? With a menacing glare and glowing crimson eyes, the Duke acted deathly serious, demanding to know if his daughter grasped his instructions. But the moment he caught a glimpse of his little girl's radiant smile, his heart instantly dissolved into mush. His frenzied eyes sharpened with gravity because this was a catastrophic international-level crisis in his mind. Both father and daughter were visibly vibrating with tension. His eyes flashed as he grilled her on the lesson. What is the protocol if someone attempts to pat your head? Rotisa offered an adorable refusal, but in his eyes, that was a weak defense. He immediately escalated to the second phase of the drill. What if they have the audacity to pinch your cheeks? Then came the hypothetical stranger offering candy, leaving the servant standing nearby with 1,000 question marks. What kind of circus is this? Watching the two of them roleplay stranger danger safety tips suddenly triggered a wave of secondhand embarrassment. Is all this extra drama really necessary? Seeing his daughter repel those trying to approach her by unleashing her newly mastered cat scratch technique, the Duke was instantly beaming with pride, flashing a smile more luminous than the stars. It truly made the servant lose all faith in logic, and he didn't want it back. Yet, after all that intensive practice dealing with outsiders, the old man still felt her defenses were lacking. He envisioned a scenario where Rotisa should seize the hand of anyone approaching her and twist her face into a demonic mask ready to devour them alive. Wait, what? I'll launch a boulder at your skull. He immediately reached out to affectionately pat his daughter's head as a test. But who would have guessed, before he could even make contact? A piercing shriek echoed through the hall. No! Before he could even process the trauma, Rotisa continued to exert every ounce of her strength to reject his advance. I absolutely hate it. She leveled her finger directly at her father's face, reporting him as if he were a common kidnapper. This left him paralyzed and trembling while the servant in the back was low-key enjoying the show. That's the price you pay for overtuning the lessons. It backfired spectacularly. Seeing his hand still hovering in front of her, Rotisa committed to the bit to ensure his satisfaction. She gave it a fierce smack take. That you absolute creep. Words that seemed harmless felt like a serrated dagger plunging straight into the old man's vital organs, leaving him petrified where he stood. While his heart was hemorrhaging, she stood there looking all sparkly and innocent, waiting to be showered with praise for her elite performance. Seeing the old man looking utterly devastated, clutching the bleeding emotional wound inflicted by his precious daughter, the servant was speechless. "Don't you think you're being a bit dramatic, old man?" The air was thick with groans and desperate pleas for mercy. The most panicked individual on the planet right now was the former Marquis Terenka, because he was staring death in the face as Duke Ferriton had stormed in to commit cold-blooded murder without even bothering with a mask. His entire being radiated a suffocating demonic aura that turned the night into a literal hellscape. His blood-red eyes shimmered in the gloom like an apex predator stalking its prey. Faced with that nightmare, the Marquis looked pathetic, groveling on the floor with trembling limbs, whimpering that this was a noble residence, and the Emperor would never overlook such a massacre. Pure death was reflected in the Duke's eyes, and instantly countless spears of condensed demonic energy erupted from his body, hurtling toward the man like razor-sharp lances. Just as he felt his head was about to be severed from his neck, he shrieked out in a final desperate gamble, "Brother-in-law!" This caused the lances of demonic shadow to evaporate into thin air instantly. He shook with primal fear, failing to comprehend why the Duke would go to such extremes, and began to grovel, admitting it was his mistake for mistreating Rotisa. But then he lost his sanity and shrieked, "That brat isn't even the Duke's biological daughter. My sister had a scandalous affair and gave birth to a bastard." Before he could finish the insult, a massive wave of demonic aura slammed into him. The pressure was so titanic it pulverized the ceiling above, let alone a mere mortal. But letting him die so swiftly would be a mercy, so the Duke spared his life, using his predatory eyes and a voice that made skin crawl. "What did you say about my daughter?" Now the man tasted true horror and begged for a quick end, but it was too late. A terrifying gravity radiated from the Duke, chanting, "Die, die," like a death knell. After a blood-curdling scream, he panted like an exhausted dog. Convinced he had perished, he frantically clawed at his neck. His head was miraculously still attached. He managed a pathetic smile, deluding himself into thinking the Duke had shown mercy because they were kin, because he was his brother-in-law. But the Duke simply wanted him to endure a fate far worse than death, living a hollow, miserable existence. The first step was forcibly stripping him of the signet ring that bore his title. The ring embedded with the crimson ruby was the sole proof of Terenka's authority. He usually kept it secured around his neck, but now he searched in a frenzy only to find it gone. The Duke's eyes glowed with utter contempt, as if he were observing something beneath a maggot. He was unworthy of the title, and seizing the ring meant his rank of Marquis was officially revoked. The man was paralyzed with horror by those words. Without power in his palms, he was absolutely nothing. Like a lunatic, he clutched his head, writhing and howling in a void of despair. For a man who lived only for vanity and prestige, this was the ultimate damnation. The scandal immediately became the hottest gossip in the capital, and even Rotisa perked up her ears to eavesdrop on the juicy rumors of the Marquis being demoted to a commoner. She wasn't concerned about a rebellion, since he was now rotting in isolation. He was just a hollow shell of a man with nothing left. He owed his entire lifestyle to his wife's lineage, but now that his status had evaporated, she heartlessly divorced him, truly every man for himself. But what Rotisa cared about most in this moment was the fate of the bratty Clety. Naturally, she'd be dragged along by her mother, since her family's standing was technically higher now. Yet that girl was completely oblivious to the gravity of the situation, and threw a massive tantrum, refusing to leave with her mother because their family would be demoted to mere viscounts. With a completely nonsensical logic, she acted out simply because she couldn't stomach the idea of losing to Rotisa. She couldn't help but marvel. Shorty was truly a top-tier informant, capable of spreading gossip across continents and intercepting news at lightning speed. Naturally, wherever there's drama or tea, you'll find the footprints of those busybodies who live to sniff out every juicy detail. A week later, she had to depart from this mansion to venture toward the ancestral territory of the Duchy of Ferriton. The servants were overflowing with enthusiasm, moving so frantically, they looked ready to tear the roof off just to prepare for the migration inland. All because she was required to grace the triumphal return ceremony with her presence. Their duchy was situated in the north, a realm of bone-chilling frost, and it was the northern fief of the Archduke of this Rafant story, none other than her father. While she was feeling immense pride for her old man, handsome, filthy rich, and showering his golden child with bliss, suddenly the system began pinging incessantly with notifications spamming her vision, even as she desperately tried to ignore it. But that cursed system kept hounding her like a relentless spam bot, leaving her feeling utterly annoyed and dead inside. She quickly accessed the interface to shut it up. The notification read, "Just end cut grade F, bonus reward. Lucky potion granted via a new system item." The system then mockingly offered hearty congratulations for bleeding every asset from the marquis' throat. Clap, 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 bravo. But before she could celebrate, a new mission manifested without mercy: "My assets won't stop." She tried to play dead, thinking if she didn't look, she wouldn't have to grind, but she was startled by the notification nonetheless. This mission was actually quite sweet. 0 penalty, and the only condition was to sit on a mountain of money while operating the Mana Stone business with a massive reward of 10,000 gold. Her eyes instantly sparkled with greed. Truly, the job chooses the person, but the person always chooses the money. Though she had no desire to sell her soul to capitalism by working her fingers to the bone. When massive wealth comes knocking, you'd be a fool not to answer. She quickly accepted the mission, which had 2 requirements. First, the kind reader's path, and second, my assets won't stop. The first required burning gold to summon a novel and extract a power with a measly pity reward of 1,000 gold. Back then, she had utilized a premium summon ticket just to access a single novel. Realizing she was being nickel and dimed by that silver-haired demon, Retisa's blood pressure spiked to her brain in a fit of rage. She tore at the plushie in her hands. "Next time I catch you, you're absolute meat." The 2 servants working nearby heard her muttering to herself like a local lunatic and felt compelled to chime in. With no other choice, Retisa had to pivot and pretend she was merely having a deep conversation with her stuffed animal. She successfully deceived them, but their faces couldn't hide how utterly obsessed they were with their lady, accidentally blurring out how precious she was, a far cry from the young masters, her brothers. Remembering what that punk had promised, he had certainly delivered on making her old man look incredibly cool and legendary. So she harbored massive expectations that her 3 older brothers would be top-tier specimens, rising stars who inherited their dad's god-tier visuals. Curious and hopeful, she quickly quizzed the servants on what her brothers actually looked like. But facing Retisa's sparkling, expectant eyes, the 2 went silent and immediately looked away. That expression alone was enough for her to grasp the grim reality, and she felt dead inside, realizing that silver-haired punk had definitely played her once again. Meanwhile, at the Duke's northern stronghold, the staff there had prepared every detail to welcome their master home, but the atmosphere remained gloomy because the estate was perpetually frigid. The people there had also intercepted rumors that the youngest lady would finally be joining their ranks. The golden child of the Duke, currently basking in an insane amount of blatant favoritism. But the head butler there was a total loner who was out of the loop, stubbornly assuming such a thing would never happen. At that moment, the MC Retisa was sweating buckets because of the overly extravagant bearsuit the maids had forced upon her. It left her old man with a massive question mark. What was the deal with that stuffy-looking, oversized fluff ball? Because right now, not only was the sky perfectly clear, but the sun was blinding and it was a scorching 40 degrees Celsius outside. He couldn't fathom why his daughter was dressed so aggressively out of season. But Retisa was shy because this was a gift from the maids. She felt she'd be drowning in guilt if she didn't wear it. The situation was just like when she saw his old wound and insisted on blowing on it. Even knowing it was scientifically useless, she still did it, which was quite bizarre. Seeing Retisa pouting because her healing spell was dismissed as useless, he couldn't help but reach out and pinch her dumpling cheek, a rare, gentle smile gracing his face. Such smiles weren't a rarity anymore, as he offered her his gratitude. All the local servants were so stunned they forgot how to close their mouths. Witnessing the surreal scene before them, that mobile fluffball was actually the legendary youngest lady of the house. Why was she radiating such no-escape cuteness, so radically different from the little demoness they had envisioned? The moment Retisa let out even a tiny, adorable sneeze, the old man's eyes flashed with lethal intensity, worrying she might catch a cold. This made them tremble in primal fear. He was the one who ordered this fortress to be forever frozen. So was he going to backpedal and slaughter them now? Before anything could happen, the servants brought from the capital were already frantically sprinting east and west to keep Retisa warm. It gave the northern servants another heart attack, thinking those people were on a suicide mission or playing the fool to brown-nose the young lady. But they never anticipated that Retisa would be so favored that the Duke himself would manually pick her up. That scene left everyone totally shell-shocked and disoriented. Was this truly their cold and terrifying master? Gazing at him now, he's nothing but a hopeless simp for his daughter, strictly warning her that she isn't allowed to let anyone else carry her but him. The servants turn into bewildered fossils, like what on earth is actually happening? The Ghost Festival is long over, so it's not like he's suddenly possessed or something. Suddenly, two teenage silhouettes emerged at the top of the stairs. He introduced them as her older brothers. She immediately whipped out her imaginary spectacles to gauge the handsomeness levels of the duo. Seeing their top-tier visuals made her gasp. The eldest is Ares, the second son. The shorter, prickly brat standing beside him is Scion, the Duke's third son. Just one look, and she knew they were elite mini versions of the Duke a solid 100/10. She quickly tried to act chic and sparkly to match her brother's energy. Her heart was racing as she fantasized about being spoiled rotten by her siblings, but reality slapped her right in the jaw. Scion opened his mouth and immediately mocked her. So it's just this pathetic little brat. Instantly, her internal score for the kid took a massive nosedive as she stood there frozen stiff. She could practically hear the sound of her heart shattering into a million pieces. Before departing, Scion didn't forget to hurl one last savage jab. She looks so fragile, she'll probably end up on a sacrificial altar soon, terrifying her so much she was on the verge of tears. This kid's scariness was at max level, and the first impression was absolute trash. So when the second brother, Ares, approached, she started sweating bullets. She expected him to bite her head off like the other brat, but surprisingly, Ares was incredibly warm. He took her tiny ice-cold hands into his own and rubbed them gently. His face was practically radiating a holy aura like a literal saint from the heavens. His good boy reputation points instantly crashed through the ceiling. 1,000 points, no questions asked. After getting cleaned up and donning a super cute frilly dress, her eyes sparkled with excitement to greet her brothers again. Spotting the adorable little girl coming to find him, the second brother, Ares, immediately flashed a dazzling sunny smile. So incredibly gentle and kind. It made her heart melt instantly. Yes, this is the big brother of her dreams. Totally opposite to Ares, Scion looked visibly disgusted, viewing her as nothing but a troublesome nuisance. Despite having a flawless, handsome face, his attitude was arrogant and prickly, showing zero interest in bonding with Ratissa. It caused her flowery mood to wilt in a heartbeat. We're kin, not strangers, so why the hostile energy, bro? This duo was giving her a major migraine. Unlike that icy demeanor, Ares was soft and welcoming. With a face radiating holy light, he expressed his wish for the two of them to get along. Her eyes shimmered with pure adoration. Though Ares possessed the black hair and crimson eyes of the Phaeton line, unlike their typical lethal coldness, this boy had soft downturned eyes and a saintly aura. Definitely an angel, a literal cherub descended from heaven. Witnessing the pink, lovey-dovey atmosphere between the two of them made Scion sitting nearby want to gag. He couldn't comprehend what was wrong with his brother. Did he eat something toxic to be acting so sweet to a weak little girl? Who knew this kid only had looks while his mouth was pure venom? He dared to talk back to his brother like that, making her blood boil. She was ready to bite him, but Ares calmed her down, praising her. But our youngest sister is so precious. Watching Ares be the mature adult, ignoring his brother's trash talk, she then looked over and compared him to Scion, who was just a rude, grumpy edgelord. But in her perspective, even if his personality was absolute garbage, the author had gifted him a permanent shimmer filter. Her obsessed with pretty boys instinct went into overdrive, and she couldn't stop herself from low-key drooling. Scion was so creeped out, he immediately leaped 10 meters away. What is wrong with this weird, perverted brat? Even if she found his ego insufferable, she was helpless. With a face that divine, anyone would be a stan. She began to pout, making the kid's skin crawl as he questioned reality. What kind of thirsty demon was this girl in her past life? Seeing the two of them locked in their own world made Ares spark with jealousy. He interjected with puppy dog eyes, asking if she truly thought Scion was the hotter brother. This sent Ratissa into a total tailspin. She frantically flailed her arms in a desperate denial. So no way, it's not like that, my idol. You're the most handsome specimen in the multiverse. This left Scion sitting there looking like a fool, and he immediately gnashed his teeth in fury. In a fit of rage, he slammed his hand on the table with a thunderous bang. His entire silhouette vibrated with a surging demonic aura. He couldn't stomach this wholesome family roleplay happening between those two. Suddenly, the system chose the absolute worst timing to drop a quest. It simply couldn't allow a brother archetype in a romance novel to be so incredibly weird. He had to follow the sweet to his sister setting. The quest, Ratissa must punish that mindless brat and force Scion to acknowledge her as a family member. Reward 3,000 gold. Another mission, another massive headache. At this point, you might as well tell me to go jump off a bridge. The tension between them was thick enough to choke on, so how on earth is she supposed to pull off this stunt? Whatever, what's the worst that could happen with one rebellious brat in the house who refuses to play nice? But then she glimpsed the system prompt and was instantly paralyzed. Rejecting the quest meant a getting yeeted off the earth penalty. I'm in agony. I'm literally collapsing, making Ares next to her wonder what on earth was wrong with the poor kid. Meanwhile, Sion was acting totally smug, mocking her. Typical weakling, whining and crying before we even start. But before he could even finish his taunt, Rotisa shut him down. She wasn't having it. She's the GOAT and was determined to make this guy acknowledge her as his sister. However, Sion went full tilt and unleashed his demonic energy, blitzing straight at Rotisa with godlike speed. Suddenly, Ares' voice thundered out, warning him. The demonic energy was instantly dispelled by Ares' saintly eyes as he snatched her into his arms to protect her. He was radiating pure killing intent, no longer a dazzling angel. Instead, you could feel the spine-chilling dread in his crimson eyes, pure Phaeton savagery. But that only made Sion feel more hyped, and he broke into a twisted, crazed grin. His eyes kept flashing as if he had just discovered the ultimate new toy. But Ares wasn't having it. Stepping up as the big brother, he started lecturing the kid for being so disrespectful this whole time. Rotisa let out a breath of relief because he still seemed like the gentle maternal angel until he dropped a terrifying line. "Should I just snap your neck so you'll finally behave?" It left her frozen on the spot. She had to ask herself, what the hell did I just hear? In the blink of an eye, the two brothers had already vaulted from their seats and were lunging at each other with pure, unadulterated hatred. Panicking because she didn't know how to stop these two mad beasts from tearing each other apart, Rotisa was absolutely terrified. Because no matter what, when the heavyweights clash, the small fry get pulverized. She couldn't let her newly blooming paradise be incinerated like this. She bit her lip, loathing the cringe factor, but she had to deploy the ultimate weapon to prevent an explosion. She immediately morphed into a fragile, blushing maiden. "Please stop fighting. Please don't use bad words, and please don't rip each other's clothes. It's all my fault for being too precious." Hearing that the two brothers were stunned and frozen mid-motion, she immediately cranked the ague up to max, winking playfully and vowing she'd only be a little bit cute from now on, so no one has to catch a fade. The two guys were speechless. Like, what the hell did this kid eat to be able to say something so nauseatingly cringe? But thanks to that, the tension evaporated instantly as they lost interest, successfully stopping them from throwing hands. Back in her room alone, she wanted to bury the self that said those disgusting, cheesy words. But then she remembered the system's threat. If she failed the mission, she wouldn't even have a life left to be embarrassed about. She quickly regrouped. She'd devoured enough romance novels to not go down easy, but she still cried a river because she couldn't trigger any FL perks. Her only asset now was that mind-reading skill from the earlier prophecy. Drawing from her experience as a hardcore binge reader, she was ready to fight to the bitter end. This stuff is too easy for a pro. From then on, Rotisa clung to Sion like superglue. Wherever the kid went, she was right there pitter-pattering behind his back like a shadow. He found her an absolute eyesore and immediately started barking, "Get those noisy-ass shoes! Away from me right now, the sound is deafening." But it didn't faze Rotisa. Not only was she thick-skinned, but she also played the naive child card, reminding them her dad was the one who gifted the shoes. That successfully gagged Sion. He didn't dare bark anymore since he was a son who strictly followed his father's ironclad orders. But right now, being isolated with Sion was straight up perilous for Rotisa without Ares' holy protection. The surrounding space seemed to be plunging into a frigid, abyssal gloom. If she wanted to play games, he'd indulge her just to see if she could survive his demonic aura. He reached out as if to engulf her tiny frame, eyes glinting with amusement as he waited for his prey to break. But suddenly, Sion was stunned into silence and immediately retracted every ounce of his demonic pressure. Rotisa had suddenly crouched down, covering her face. He thought he had actually made her cry. To his utter shock, Rotisa didn't have a single tear in sight. Instead, she was beaming with pure radiance, chirping, "Sion is playing with me." It made him question his reality. What's wrong with this brat? But before he could even protest, Rotisa immediately pounced and lunged into his personal space. She'd read him like a book, knowing he low-key wanted in on the fun. She completely hijacked the narrative. Full throttle, we're playing tag, catch me if you can slowpoke. While the boy was still buffering, unable to process the chaos, Rotisa took off like a literal bolt of lightning. Everything was proceeding exactly as planned. She let out a devious cackle, "Catching me won't be that simple." According to the brother management playbook in romance novels, never retreat, not even an inch, no matter how hard they try to ice you out. Always keep a smiling face like you're high on something. Though the kid's demonic pressure earlier was legitimately terrifying, to a reincarnated soul like her, navigating this family drama was absolute light work. Suddenly she was startled as a hand grabbed her body and hoisted her up. None other than Sion, who had caught up in no time at all. Obviously, his superhuman speed would totally gank Rotisa's short, dangling legs. This made her rejoice, convinced that her icy and distant older brother had finally taken the initiative to give her a hug. But when she glimpsed the look of pure, unadulterated disgust on the boy's face, it totally killed her vibe. She tried to play it cool, but deep down she was crying. A river getting him to lower his guard was definitely a monumental task. She had to deploy her ultimate pouty face skill, puffing out her adorable cheeks. I just want to play with Big Brother Sion, and sure enough, it was super effective. That sparkly, innocent gaze made him hesitate for a few precious seconds. But suddenly, the old man appeared. It's been a hot minute since our Duke was on screen. The author blessed him with a stunning fit that accentuated every muscle. He was absolutely radiating main character energy. No matter how many times Sion witnessed the two of them acting all lovey-dovey like a typical father and daughter, the kid could never truly adapt to this unnervingly gentle side of his cold-blooded father. Not only that, but he doted on the little one so much that regardless of how packed his schedule was, he'd always carve out time to have yum-yums with Rotisa. This time, the sheer absurdity of it left Sion paralyzed with shock. Did the word yum-yums really just escape his father's terrifying mouth? His whole body shuddered. He questioned his reality, thinking maybe the stress was finally causing his hearing to fail. But he immediately jumped when the Duke shifted his cold gaze toward him and interrogated him on whether the little one was being bullied. Sion couldn't mask his emotions and nervously swallowed a thick lump of anxiety. Fearing the kid would snitch about him, weaponizing his demonic aura on her earlier, he was on the verge of confessing his sins, figuring a preemptive strike would be better than getting caught and executed. But to his utter shock, Rotisa cut him off and flatly denied it, saying no, which left Sion completely floored. He watched in dazed silence as Rotisa babbled on about how much fun she had playing with Sion, facing that brilliant smile. Those sweet words made his heart skip a beat. He couldn't comprehend why this kid would lie to cover for him and claim she actually enjoyed his company. However, the old man, totally failing to read the room, started acting all awkward and pathologically jealous. Is playing with Sion more fun than playing with me? It made the two of them feel more united than ever. They were both speechless with a "someone just poke my eyes out please" vibe. After that day, Sion went into full stealth mode. No matter where she scouted, she couldn't find a single trace of him. The tragic part was she couldn't locate her target, but that relentless system kept pressuring her to speedrun the mission. Hitting these KPIs was driving her insane, so she stomped her feet and shrieked in agony, "God, this kid has aged me a decade," which caught Ares' attention. He couldn't stop laughing at such an absurdly heavy sigh coming from someone so tiny. The boy was incredibly suave. It was the first time he'd seen someone sighing in frustration look so captivatingly adorable, so he kindly took a seat beside her. Weaponizing his dazzling sunshine smile, he attempted to deduce what was bothering his precious little sister so much. Rotisa didn't notice the enigmatic glint in Ares' eyes. She just pouted and turned away, grumbling, "Sion keeps bullying me. No matter how hard I try to vibing with him, he always dodges me. He treats me so poorly, always teasing me and sticking his tongue out. He's literally the worst." Seeing her like this, Ares decided to test the waters. "You seem to really like Sion, huh? I'm getting a bit jealous," as he subtly glanced toward a nearby pillar. Not far away, there was a suspicious silhouette lurking in the shadows. Seeing her angel acting heartbroken, she immediately shouted a frantic denial. Of course she liked Ares more. She desperately insisted she liked Ares the most. How could Sion even compete, totally oblivious to the fact that the kid was eavesdropping right behind them, overhearing every single word? Even she didn't expect that one day she'd receive the fan service of having this breathtaking brother of hers plant a kiss on her cheek. She immediately turned beet red and spiraled into a panic. "Oh my god, I just got a kiss from a literal top-tier hottie." She immediately started a victory dance in her mind. Having an older brother is an absolute cheat code. She was so overwhelmed she wanted to cry, waving imaginary light sticks and fangirling. While she was basking in the glory of being kissed by a pretty boy, she suddenly heard a thunderous boom that nearly scared the soul out of her body. She spun around and was horrified the massive pillar now had a giant crater smashed into it. She questioned her very existence, wondering why the architecture was suddenly failing, but Ares immediately ushered her back inside. She didn't notice that at that precise moment, the kid had already emerged from behind them, staring at the demolished pillar with a very smug, self-satisfied grin. Seeing Rotisa sighing and groaning in despair made Anna immediately tilt her head in confusion. Seeing how stressed she appeared, Shorty quickly tried to soothe her. "I'm certain young Master Sion isn't avoiding you." But to Rotisa, those words were like a brutal confirmation that she was loathed and being shunned, making her face turn pale as her entire worldview crumbled. Who knew her bro-conquest strategy, executed with such bravado, would crash and burn so spectacularly? Yet, she couldn't abandon the mission now. Her very survival depended on it. Rotisa quickly crossed her arms, adopting a solemn expression as she re-evaluated Sion's current tactics and defensive stance. But simply recalling the look of pure, unadulterated disgust the kid had for her because she lacked magic made her mood plummet instantly as that harsh reality seemed set in stone. She quickly grilled the maids, demanding to know the true nature of magic and why it carried such immense weight. Furthermore, the Ferreton house currently stood as the undisputed sovereign in the mastery of demonic aura. She yearned to comprehend it better, to bridge the gap with her kin. Magic was a primal force bequeathed only to direct descendants generation after generation. Unlike a mage's mana or a knight's aura, this was an extraordinary power. Wielding demonic aura was akin to being an entity that swallowed the world in eternal night. Rotisa casually remarked that it sounded like the power of a literal demon, causing the two maids to recoil in shock. Good heavens, little miss, you've got it all twisted and you're broadcasting it far too loudly. They scrambled to hush her, terrified she'd catch wind of the dark rumors. They insisted it was merely an overwhelming, majestic power. It typically strikes terror into the hearts of men and makes their skin crawl, but her flat denial gave them pause. Rotisa had witnessed that magic before, and never once found its abyssal black hue frightening. She understood it was a force of pure darkness and absolute dominance. Yet, instead of dread, Rotisa felt it was a warm extension of her father. She'd watch it and lose her breath, because within that void something seemed to shimmer. For a fleeting moment she saw it glistening like distant stars. To Rotisa, that magic was a midnight sanctuary, warmer than anything else, a place where she could finally close her eyes and find peace. Meanwhile, Ares was standing just outside, eavesdropping on every single word. But he wasn't alone. Sion was there too, perched on a tree branch, while Ares advised him to temper his rage and stop obliterating estate property like that pillar from this morning. But the kid was left spiraling in thought because Rotisa's actions were a total contradiction. She claimed she wanted to play with him, yet when Sion was lurking behind the pillar, he heard her explicitly state that she preferred a gentle soul like Ares. Feeling even more agitated, he leaped down and stormed off, but not before snarling that he wouldn't trust a single word from Rotisa, dismissing her as a total fraud. At the same time, the vassals were utterly floored after seeing the massive mana mine she had swindled or extorted from the marquis. The vassals from the island territory were quick to flex, especially the red-haired guy. You guys seeing this, see how absolutely cracked my idol is. He immediately let his fanboy flag fly, panting like a total simp while hyping up his tiny master. Faced with the relentless barrage of praise, she just wanted to phase out and pretend she was invisible to avoid the crippling secondhand embarrassment. The system suddenly chimed in with a new objective. The infinite asset glitch successfully launched the Mana Stone Enterprise. Seizing the moment, she immediately petitioned her dad for total control over that literal mountain of cold hard cash. The vassals who were cheering moments ago now tried to intervene with everything they had because Rotisa was still just a pint-sized toddler. But suddenly, a firm decree rang out, radiating, "I'm so wealthy it's offensive" energy. It doesn't matter if she squanders every last cent. That absolute power move of a statement came from her filthy rich dad, the ultimate sugar daddy everyone wishes they had. But even with a hoard of gold, the vassals remained skeptical. How could a tiny munchkin like Rotisa possibly navigate the family business? Even she was breaking into a cold sweat, now nodding like a bobblehead, because if she botched the mission, she'd truly be a 40-year-old infant. The Duke's killing intent flared. "My daughter can treat the treasury like a toy chest. What business is it of yours, then?" Who knew that such reckless, excessive pampering, completely ignoring the fallout, would be noted by Red Hair, who let out a deeply suspicious smirk. Channeling his inner loyal fanboy, he prepared to deliver a delicate spread of snacks to Rotisa, when a thunderous boom suddenly made him leap out of his skin. He frantically hugged the snack box to his chest. What an assassin coming for the lady's treats. But a black-haired man stepped out to clarify it was just young Master Sion's training. Lately, the kid had been haunting the training grounds for hours, so he certainly wouldn't be back anytime soon. Black Hair casually inquired what the box Red Hair was guarding was actually for. The guy immediately flipped into full-on stand mode, hearts practically radiating from his eyes. "You really want the tea?" Inside is a premium cherry cake for Rotisa. But instead of hoping for a joyful reaction, the guy was actually dying to see her bored expression when she asks, "Are you seriously pestering me again?" Simultaneously, at the training grounds, Sion pulverized a massive boulder with a single devastating blow. The instructor was visibly on edge, sensing the kid's power becoming more lethal and unstable by the day. He cautiously advised him to cool his jets, wondering if his foul mood was perhaps triggered by the youngest lady. The mere mention of Rotisa caused Sion's eyes to ignite with a predatory, threatening glare. That one look was enough to make the instructor's hair stand on end, his entire frame shuddering uncontrollably. That was the standard physiological response of any mortal facing magic that crushed their spirit, which only made it impossible for Sion to buy into Rotisa's sweet talk. To his ears, it was all just hollow flattery, the desperate survival mechanism of the weak. In a venomous mood, he kicked open his bedroom door with pure violence. Usually, she'd be lounging there waiting to ambush him with her clingy antics, but today she was nowhere to be found, triggering an unexpected surge of petty jealousy. Rotisa must have grown bored of him and retreated back to playing the doting little sister to that saintly Ares. But Sion suddenly faltered because he couldn't detect the rhythmic pitter-patter of her footsteps even if she was currently out of sight. Today, the atmosphere within the estate had become unnervingly deathly silent. Gripped by a dark premonition, Sion frantically began his search, but she was nowhere to be found even after he practically turned the mansion inside out. He was soon gasping for air from pure exhaustion while beads of cold sweat trickled down his face. Then a horrific scene materialized before him, a familiar small red shoe abandoned on the dirt alongside a mess of footprints trampling a white fur cloak. More than anyone, Sion understood the cruel reality that the weak are utterly powerless to defend themselves. He immediately vanished like a streak of lightning, determined to track down Rotisa before her time ran out. He scoured every hidden corner of the sprawling estate, from the dense shrubbery to the marble fountains. Finally, he spotted a suspicious group hauling Rotisa in their arms, making a desperate break from the mansion toward the dark pine forest. The moment he locked eyes with that familiar face, a vortex of abyssal shadow began to violently surge. The darkness lunged forward and devoured the group whole. Before they could even register the horror, they saw Sion, standing directly in their path with crazed incandescent eyes that radiated a bone-chilling, lethal coldness. The stagnant air was suddenly ripped apart by a massive shockwave of wind that instantly rose up to consume them all. They were effectively erased from the physical world with a single contemptuous flick of Sion's hand. As his bloodlust receded and his humanity clawed its way back, the sight greeting Sion now was nothing but the deep crimson stain of spilled syrup, with a trembling Rotisa standing at the epicenter of the carnage. The innocent smile Rotisa wore when she called his magic a warm, dark night was now surely shattered forever. Sion felt a sudden, sharp pang in his chest, fighting back the stinging tears of regret. As he feared, it had all been a beautiful lie. Sinking into a spiral of dark thoughts, every memory of Rotisa's laughter played through his mind like a tragic film reel. The delusion that her radiant, smiling self actually wanted to be his family was clearly nothing but a total sham. But he was jolted out of his despair and snapped back to the present, when a tiny shivering hand desperately gripped the fabric of Sion's clothes. Rotisa didn't look traumatized. Instead, she wore her usual expression and a weak smile, struggling to whisper a thank you. Then she erupted into tears, scolding him fiercely. "You meanie, I was absolutely terrified. What took you so long to get here?" Sion just stood there, paralyzed, silently absorbing every bit of the girl's frantic scolding. But then, unexpectedly, Rotisa lunged forward and buried herself in a hug, sobbing uncontrollably against him. This was the first time he had ever felt the fragile body heat of another child. It turns out, it's incredibly warm. He finally reached out and pulled his little sister tight, trying his best to offer her some comfort. Once the news broke, the entire servant staff fell into a state of absolute hysteria. The mansion was in total chaos because a security breach like this was unprecedented in the Phaeton lineage. They were born with such overwhelming power that they never considered the need for a high-alert defense against mere kidnappers. People had been drifting in and out of the estate with zero oversight, which is why she became such a defenseless target. The vassals couldn't fathom the report that Rotisa had been abducted from right under their noses inside her own home. The Duke's voice sliced through the room, icy and lethal. "Are you suggesting that my daughter, being snatched from within the walls of my own fortress, is something I should treat as a trivial matter?" His aura forced the entire room into a suffocating silence. Not a single soul dared to breathe a word in their defense. It wasn't just the old man. Even Ares was struggling to suppress his murderous rage because the staff's negligence had put his sister's life on the line. But the priority wasn't culling the staff, it was unmasking the mastermind behind the plot. Yet, they had zero leads to follow, until a voice suddenly chimed in, "Why don't you just ask the source?" Leaving them all floored as the MC, the very victim of the kidnapping, walked into the war room acting as cool and composed as a cucumber. The moment the old man saw his daughter, he immediately strode over and swept her up into his arms. He knew that questioning her directly would be the most efficient route, but he was loath to force her to relive those traumatic moments. With a smirk of pure confidence, she proudly reminded them she carried the Phaeton bloodline, so she wasn't some fragile doll. Besides, Rotisa knew exactly who the snake was and insisted on hunting them down, mostly because that trash system made it a mandatory quest. She immediately pointed an accusing finger at the very person who had lured her towards Sion's training grounds. In a shocking twist, it was Red Hair, leaving the entire room in a state of absolute disbelief. Because this guy had always played the part of a hardcore fanboy, no one ever dreamed he would betray his master like this. Rotisa quickly began grilling the witnesses, the instructor who was with Sion, and then Red Hair. How exactly did he know the kid's precise training schedule? Being cornered made him spiral into terror, his face drained of all color as he stammered out a confession claiming he only went to see her around 3 o'clock. But today, the instructor had slipped up and provoked Sion, causing the boy to storm out of the training grounds in less than 10 minutes. Red Hair claimed he was completely in the dark about that change and frantically pleaded his case while drenched in sweat. Naturally, he shouldn't have known since Sion is a moody brat with zero consistency in his schedule. Only she knew that with absolute certainty, as she'd been tailing the brat like a persistent shadow, besides few dare enter the inner sanctum where Red Hair normally would have collided with Sion, but this time they pivoted to the East Garden at his prompting. Had she proceeded, east their paths would never have intertwined unless Sion had deliberately doubled back from the main estate toward the training grounds. Only then was a meeting possible. That ironclad logic backed Red Hair into a corner, forcing every suspicious eye in the room to lock onto him as the prime suspect. But he immediately erupted in denial, shrieking that he'd embraced death before ever becoming a traitorous culprit. He looked utterly unhinged, like a manic edgelord who had completely spiraled off his medication. He kept chanting that he was her most devoted servant, his voice reaching a fever pitch as he prepared to scream, his lungs raw. Suddenly, Ratisa gave him a sharp, knowing nod of acknowledgement. It left him frozen mid-flex, looking like a total clown. From the jump, she never actually suspected Red Hair, she just needed to grill him to smoke out the real kidnapper. This sudden plot twist left the crowd reeling with a million questions. Wait, so this guy isn't the snake crap I already absolutely obliterated his character in my head? Finally, Rotisa fixed Red Hair with a piercing gaze, commanding him to scour his memory for who that person could truly be. The boy staggered from one shock to the next, his expression falling completely blank. But amidst the mental fog, a sinister silhouette suddenly flickered through his mind, and he gasped. Could it really be him? He recalled the man who had approached him for a casual chat while he was delivering snacks to Ratisa. He had accidentally let it slip that she was obsessed with flowers and a frequent guest at the greenhouse. That revelation had caused the man's face to twist into a smug, predatory grin. It was none other than the black-haired butler. The old man's eyes ignited with a lethal killing intent. Drag that bastard's head out here this instant. Ares, standing nearby, couldn't stop showering her with praise, claiming his sister was a literal genius, but it left Ratisa with a massive question mark. Since they hadn't even confirmed the butler's guilt, yet being hyped up like this made it feel like the boy had known the truth all along. The moment they seized the black-haired traitor, he collapsed to his knees, vomiting excuses. It wasn't me, I swear. He was about to swear a desperate blood oath when suddenly a search of his quarters unearthed a letter explicitly requesting Ratisa's abduction. To make matters worse, they discovered a communication device of unknown origin, causing his face to contort in pure despair. But before he could even part his lips to weave another lie, he was completely paralyzed. He froze in place when he met the Duke's gaze, which looked more horrifying than a literal demon from the abyss. After shipping the guy off to the Icethorn Tower to enjoy the rest of his miserable life, the vassals began shamelessly buttering her up, as expected of a Pharaton handling a crisis with such icy composure. But suddenly, amidst the murmurs of admiration, a local lunatic started shrieking and sprinting in circles. It was the red-haired kid suffering a full-blown fanboy seizure, thanking the heavens because his idol had interrogated him in front of the elite. In his twisted head, Ratisa was more than a saint. She had entrusted him with the holy crusade of finding the culprit, and he was losing his sanity over being deemed worthy by his idol. The old man looked utterly repulsed and barked the order. Drag that creep out of my sight and pluck his feathers for me, finally allowing her to exhale a sigh of relief. Finally, that top-tier weirdo was unceremoniously tossed out into the street. Reflecting on it, since she was last seen with red hair, his reputation was destined to be cooked. Whether the snatching succeeded or failed, they were going to pin the whole crime on him. But how could I be brainless enough to fall for such a basic frame-up? She giggled to herself, feeling incredibly smug. But the mood instantly turned grim as the old man, absolutely fuming, began dealing out punishment to those who failed to secure the mansion. The moment of truth arrived. Every servant was trembling like a leaf under the merciful gaze of our kindly Duke. Rotisa could only intervene on their behalf, claiming she was the one wandering off and the staff were blameless, but her roaming the halls was a given. The failure lay entirely in security. They had fundamentally failed to execute their one job. Neglecting their duties was precisely why this catastrophe had unfolded. Seeing the tension, she had to deploy her ultimate weapon. Her eyes grew watery and luminous, radiating a pitiful, heart-wrenching aura. It's because I refuse to stay in my room that everyone is being punished. It's all my fault. She immediately cranked her tragic acting up to 11. She promised to remain in the house like it was a maximum security prison cell, assuming this would make the old man buckle with guilt. Who knew Ares would completely sabotage the plan, casually remarking, "That doesn't sound half bad," leaving her totally floored. The boy flashed a radiant, flowery smile, promising to haul every treasure on earth to Rotisa's room so she'd never have to step foot outside again. She was shook. Wait, this was definitely not how this script was supposed to play out. She doubled down on the crocodile tears, eyes brimming. "I'll stay in my room, but I'll probably join my ancestors in the grave due to total muscle atrophy." That hit them like a lightning bolt, leaving the two of them staring at her in absolute unmitigated horror. Faster than you can flip a pancake, the man who was just about to execute the servants dropped everything for his daughter. It left the staff looking like total idiots, thinking, wait, what just happened? How did the Duke's ironclad decree of punishment get nuked so effortlessly? Though they couldn't fathom their chilly father-daughter dynamic, the servants were too busy bowing in frantic gratitude to the young lady. A system window materialized. Magpie's revenge quest has been cleared. Reward 1 draw ticket and 50,000 gold. The system chimed, "Congrats, your influence within the faction has surged. You've been granted 8,000 gold." Before she could celebrate the system's rare generosity, another prompt flashed. "Surprise privilege for an influencer. Choose a bonus up to 20,000 gold." Leaving her utterly bewildered. After retreating to her room, she scrambled to open her status window to check if she'd hallucinated quest number 3 was still very much active. Manage the household first remained stubbornly incomplete. That meant Sion still hadn't accepted Rodeza as family, making her tear up in pure frustration, that brat. But she shook it off. The priority was the gotcha pull to secure that bag. Immediately, the lucky wheel appeared, radiating a heavy, intoxicating scent of money aura. But as she zoomed in, the 20,000 gold slot was microscopic, literally a pixel-wide sliver. The rest were mere 10 or 20 gold crumbs, or the dreaded better luck next time talk about a total scam. But she was already wise to that silver-haired devil's shady schemes. "Think you can play me not today?" She quickly accessed her inventory and popped the lucky potion. She expected a miracle, but it looked incredibly sus. Wait, this is so budget. It only lasts an hour, boosting luck to its absolute lifetime peak. Rotisa decided to YOLO it and chugged the bottle, but it tasted like a street market knockoff. Why does magic taste like mint choco? Luckily, the effect hit her like a truck. A surge of divine fortune flooded her veins. With victory in her sight, she refused to believe she couldn't snipe that 20,000 gold jackpot. She spun all 3 wheels simultaneously. In the heat of the pull, fireworks literally erupted in her face. The system announced she'd bagged 2,000 gold twice and 3,500 gold once. Surprisingly, she hit the high rolls effortlessly. She began worshipping the empty potion bottle. Not wanting to waste the hour buff, she whipped out the novel, The Villainess Doesn't Want to Love, to extract a summoning power that could gauge affection levels. Colorful winged hearts drifted into view for her selection. Rotisa quickly snatched the pink heart as it looked the most like a classic affection meter. Meanwhile, Sion was in bed looking ghastly and weak, snoring away when he suddenly sensed a presence. "Are you here to finish me off?" he croaked. He expected a cold-blooded assassin, but the figure with glowing red eyes in the shadows was actually Ares. Of course he wasn't there. To end Sion, that would be too easy. Instead, he calmly handed the kid a glass of water, reminding him to rein in his volatile temper. If his demonic aura had spiraled out of control, Sion might have perished from the sheer strain of overusing his power. Sion knew better than anyone that he couldn't let his aura detonate back then, not just because of the backlash, but because little Rotisa would have been vaporized in the blast. He clearly cared for her, but the second Ares called him out, Sion got triggered and hurled the glass at his brother. Seeing Sion actually harbor feelings for someone was a rare sight, and it piqued Ares' interest significantly. Ares placed a hand over Sion's eyes. Suddenly, a massive surge of demonic aura from the eldest brother began flowing into Sion's depleted body. Sion was stunned that Ares was actually jump-starting his recovery, casting a suspicious glare at him. With a stoic face and a terrifyingly polite smirk, Ares maintained his persona. "Is there a problem with looking out for my dear brother?" Before exiting, Ares didn't forget to troll him by mentioning how much he missed Rotisa after days apart. Sion gnashed his teeth in a fury, but he was helpless. Thanks to that jerk, his strength was finally returning. Haunted by Ares' words, even though he loathed to admit it, Sion rolled out of bed and dragged himself to the window. He spotted Rotisa below tending to the plants. Trying to act nonchalant, he headed down to confront her anyway. Seeing her bright, squishy face made him falter. He wondered if this was a mistake. Was she traumatized after the kidnapping ordeal? Suddenly, his mood plummeted, leaving her bewildered and wondering what the hell was wrong. Seeing that innocent face only irritated him further, making him grind his teeth. He reached out toward her, deciding to let fate take over. No matter how she reacted to his demonic aura, it had nothing to do with him. Sharpened spikes of demonic aura immediately lunged toward Ratisa. Sion steeled his heart. Even if she started hacking up blood or fainted on the spot, he wouldn't flinch. But the split second he heard his little sister cough, he recoiled. In front of him, Ratisa lost all control. Syrup was spraying out of her mouth like a horror movie. The servants were paralyzed with horror and scrambled over as Ratisa lost all motor control and collapsed. Before the world went dark, she saw Sion's panicked, devastated face as he lunged for her, but Ratisa couldn't explain that she wasn't dying from the aura, it was just her new power. To find the source of the drama, we have to rewind to when she chose the skill Clink, Clink, Click, a truly garbage name. But it's actually a cheat code where coughing blood makes you peak tier healthy. The original FL was a terminally ill villainess. Her curse made her stronger through receiving love. Essentially, the more affection she gets, the more toxins are expelled from her body via blood and phlegm. Suddenly, having a condition worse than terminal cancer made her scream and roll in agony, cursing that silver-haired demon. Thanks to that trash power, she was now out cold, looking ready to meet her maker. Sion was frantic with dread, oblivious to the fact that Rotisa's body was actually undergoing a divine detox. Struggling against her failing consciousness, she reached out a trembling hand to touch Sion's face, trying to whisper that she was okay. After that, she felt a wave of relief and her hand went limp as she started snoring. But in Sion's eyes, it looked like his precious little sister was taking her final breath. He couldn't mask his despair and screamed in a panic, "Wake up, Rotisa!" Meanwhile, the old man looked deathly serious as he sat by her bedside keeping a silent vigil. Recalling the doctor's words after the terrifying diagnosis, Rotisa was perfectly fine, healthy as an ox. The doctor was sweating bullets, fearing he'd lose his head. She looked like she was on her deathbed, but she was just purging accumulated toxins. Detoxifying through coughing blood is rare but legendary. Usually only high-level aura users can pull it off. The final verdict, she fainted from sheer exhaustion. After a solid nap, she'd wake up good as new. Even knowing it wasn't fatal, the Duke still had a massive migraine. From the kidnapping to the blood spitting, he hadn't known a moment of peace. It triggered memories of the first time he met her after years at war. He had always assumed she was living large, eating like a queen, and dressing in silk, but he never expected to find her looking so fragile. Gazing at his child lying in bed, a foreign emotion surged within him. Is this the sacred bond of a father? If it's for you, I'd gladly sacrifice my entire existence. Unexpectedly, Sion was currently huddled in a ball right outside Rotisa's chamber. With bloodshot eyes and a completely haggard expression, the moment he saw the Duke exit the room, he became incredibly flustered, as if he were desperately trying to explain everything. His whole body was trembling, drowning in self-blame for repeatedly unleashing his demonic aura near Rotisa. His hands grew restless, fidgeting with his clothes, purely consumed by worry, because demonic energy is toxic for toddlers. This was the first time the Duke had seen his extra son in such a state, so he coldly asked if Sion recalled why his precious daughter had to be raised in another household. Unlike back then, when Rotisa needed sanctuary from magic, he was here now. No spell or demonic aura could touch a single hair on her head, so this wasn't Sion's failure. But that only deepened the kid's guilt, because he actually intended to harm Rotisa for a pathetic reason, to test if her sincerity was real. Sion just wanted proof before he dared to love and trust her. Being a child starved of affection, Sion was terrified of loving someone only to get hurt. But deep down, he had now completely accepted Rotisa as his true sister. Witnessing the sight of him, trembling eyes brimming with tears on the verge of spilling, the Duke didn't punish Sion. Instead, he bestowed another chance: protect Rotisa. This startled him. He was overjoyed, but immediately hesitated to accept the mantle, fearing his presence would only make her fragile condition worse. He was immediately shut down by the Duke compared to his own power. 3 tiny wisps of the kid's demonic aura were practically nothing. Of course, the Duke could shield his daughter and keep her thriving. Hearing that assurance, Sion's face immediately lit up with relief. He squeezed his eyes shut and steeled his resolve, pushing the chamber door open to step inside. This was also the first time the Duke felt such a bizarre kinship with a child other than Rotisa. Sion had just extended his hand to check on Rotisa's status when he suddenly turned to stone. He saw her unconsciously nuzzle into his palm for warmth while she slept. It made the boy's supposedly stone-cold heart melt into mush. Muttering to himself like a total loner, he wished Rotisa would wake up soon so they could finally close the gap between them. The system window was flashing relentlessly. Internal agony is fading. Organs have been buffed to tanky levels. Visceral Fat is packing its bags and leaving, so while she was busy snoring away, she was jolted awake by the noisy system notifications. As soon as she opened her eyes, she saw Sion sitting by the bedside with his usual aggressive aura. She wondered why the brat was here until she spotted the water basin. Then it clicked, he's actually nursing me. Finally, her fever had broken. She shyly pulled the blanket over her blushing face, gazing at Sion, who was watching over her. She thought he was a cold-blooded brat, but turns out he's a total softie. She opened her heart to her brother. Every day she had prayed for a guardian, begging the heavens for a real family. Back then, she thought that void inside was just because she was lonely and isolated, but turns out the profound warmth Rotisa had always yearned for was exactly this warmth and happiness right here. Sion might look tough and hostile on the outside, but he's just a kid who wants the same thing, to have someone by his side. So, when he heard her whisper that she wanted to stay with him, it left him stunned. Rotisa reached out her tiny hand politely, as if inviting Sion to finally be her brother and her kin. But suddenly, Rotisa was left speechless when he criticized her for being as fragile as a wet noodle. Yet immediately after, Sion's neck turned beet red as he decided that, since she was so weak, she required a protector. He grasped that tiny hand. After all, that's the sacred duty and responsibility of an older brother. The system immediately threw a party, managed the family first quest, complete reward 3,000 gold, and a surprise privilege. This meant Sion had fully acknowledged her as a real family. Deep down, she was ecstatic she finally had someone who claimed her. She immediately used her little sister status to demand Sion tuck her in. This struck the kid like a thunderbolt. The big brother life is no walk in the park. He wasn't nearly as rigid or prickly as before, and when his little sister asked for head pats, Sion gently complied, making her unable to hide the pure bliss on her face. Taking an inch and wanting a mile, Rotisa dared to ask him to do 3 backflips, run in circles, wag his tail, clap, and bark like a dog. She immediately received a very gentle look from the kid. You got a death wish. Mark my words, I'll rock your entire world, literally, dear sister. Falling asleep to her brother's loving threats, she drifted into a bizarre dream dimension. There she saw the punchable face of that silver-haired demon bastard again, appearing with a sparkling, rewarding aura. But before he could even finish his sentence, her tiny hand snatched his collar, scaring the soul out of him. Her expression was one of pure savagery, looking ready to grind his bones and swallow him whole. It was all because of this jerk that she had to suffer for 4 agonizing years right after being reincarnated. But the guy played the innocent card eyes sparkling as if he had fulfilled her wish by granting her a gorgeous dad and brothers. Suddenly, she felt he had a point. It didn't seem like such a scam after all. But she snapped out of it instantly and tightened her grip on the bastard's collar. You think I'd buy that, you disrespectful dog? He thought they'd have a cool reunion after so long, but instead he got beat to a pulp, making him spread his wings to flee while still nursing a grudge. Just you wait. Once I get my body back, you're dead meat. Being beaten silly made him forget the important stuff, so he irresponsibly vanished without a word. As the space began to collapse before Rotisa's eyes, the bastard said something, but she couldn't catch a single word. Waking up with a start, Rotisa realized her bed was smothered in fresh flowers more than if she were being prepared for a funeral. Thinking she had just napped her way into being buried, Anna informed her that Sion had personally picked all these flowers for her. She broke out in a cold sweat. Wait, is that jerk actually trying to bury me alive? Since Sion knew Rotisa liked flowers, he brought them while she was sleeping and then vanished. Hearing that, she hugged the bouquet tightly, cherishing it. Because of Rotisa's presence, the entire vibe of the Duke's grand estate had been fundamentally overhauled, leaving the vassals on edge over this seismic shift. Most crucially, everyone witnesses the Duke doting on Rotisa, yet they still dismiss her as a mere child who accidentally stumbled upon a mana gold mine. They ignore her, convinced she's just a girl who can't challenge the succession anyway. However, Red Hair is leagues ahead and has already petitioned to become her personal aide. Despite his questionable fanboy exterior, he's a certified prodigy among geniuses. Even at his tender age, he earned the title of Viscount through sheer, unadulterated merit. Meanwhile, a shadowy figure clenches their fist, brooding over the fact that despite her Ferriton blood, she's completely devoid of magic. She's nothing but a defective heir who cannot be permitted to taint the line of succession. She must be purged like a burgeoning plague. But suddenly, that conspiratorial group turns to find a young man lounging right before them. He retorts with a chill, "Is that really the delusion you're all entertaining?" While she remains oblivious to the looming threat, focusing on leveling up her ritual grimoire, a blinding radiance suddenly erupts from the pages. A notification pings, "Ding, your just uncut attribute has ascended. Congratulations, the legacy functions have been unlocked. Your repertoire of abilities has expanded. The My Works list is now accessible. You may browse your purchase library at any time." Essentially, Rotisa can now manifest abilities from her past life's novels without burning more cash to unlock them. Suddenly, the system intrudes with a cryptic reminder. "Dear reader, your arrival in this realm was by no means an accident." A prompt Rotisa immediately dismisses. "Tell me something I don't know," she scoffs, knowing she was drafted simply for having the top voted comment. But instantly the system interface turns pitch black with a visceral warning. "When the light drains of color and the abyss invades the world, prepare yourselves for the biting winter." It sends a shiver through her. This romantic fantasy just took a hard turn into a dark psychological thriller. Is a full-scale invasion of dragons or demons actually on the horizon? Suddenly, the mere thought of this cursed system demanding she play the world-saving hero makes her unable to even manage a fake smile. But the moment her eyes hit the lines detailing her family being decimated by the glacial winds, her pupils dilate in pure horror. The vision of the kin she fought so hard to win over, lying cold and breathless on the dirt, makes her chest tighten with agonizing pain, but she swears to herself that she will seize the power to protect them. The system window offers a cold comfort. Do not fear. As the reader, the narrative is yours to control. Her gaze turns to steel. She will succeed. There is zero chance she'll bow to a scripted tragedy. To forge the strength to save her loved ones, she defiantly hoists the book and accepts every system quest in sight. Whether they are trivial or suicidal, the screen pings incessantly as she locks them in. Even if failure means a lethal penalty, she is determined to charge head-on into the storm without flinching. While she's still feeling her main character energy with that "I'll take on the world" vibe, a peculiar new quest chain appears, Great Power from Small Things, featuring 3 sub-objectives. First, plant a kiss on the Duke's cheek. Second, secure a piggyback ride from Cyan. And third, share a gourmet meal with Ares. Rotisa's face lights up with a purely satisfied smirk. She can't stop giggling because to her, these tasks are just free real estate. The vassals stand at stiff attention awaiting the Duke's entrance, but they are collectively floored to see him stride in carrying a small child, Rotisa herself. This is a high-level monthly summit, and an immediate objection rings out. A mere child has no place in a sanctuary such as this. But before he can finish his protest, the Duke cuts him deep, whose breath reeks so foully as he protectively shields his precious daughter's nose. While the rest of the room is paralyzed in shock, Cyan's laughter erupts. He's cackling so hard he's losing air. "Yo! Are you fossils so decrepit? You forgot how to brush. Why the stank?" Leaving the official utterly humiliated. He looks ready to vanish into the floorboards while those nearby are physically vibrating from the effort of suppressing their laughter. But the real kicker here is that it's been an eternity since Cyan graced a meeting, yet here he is. Anyone with eyes can see that the foundations of the Ferriton house are shifting. Today's agenda is to announce that the Duke has formed a personal advisory council for Rotisa, which sparks instant outrage. She's only a 4-year-old. How could she possibly govern? However, some defend the move, noting no ordinary brat could expose Marquis Terenka's corruption. The room splits into warring factions, with Red Hair ready to go nuclear on anyone disrespecting his idol, while Rotisa senses something calculated about the Duke's grand announcement. The High Elders aren't making a move, neither condemning nor endorsing, just remaining eerily calm. This is clearly a trial by fire to see if Rotisa has the mettle to lead her own council. And besides, if the Duke decides to spoil her, he'll bulldoze any objection in his path. But this time he stays his hand. While she's analyzing the board, the system pings again with a fresh subquest, the Snitch Bird. It strikes Rotisa as suspicious because there's no way the mastermind behind her kidnapping escaped her father's investigation. She begins to read his silence. He's intentionally leaving the spotlight to her trusting Rotisa to navigate this political minefield solo. Furthermore, the mission is to purge every loose end from her 3-year stint at the Marquis' estate. The Duke surely embedded a mole to monitor her well-being and oversee the support funds. That guardian must be the traitor who sold her out, and her task is to unmask that snake. To crush that bastard, she must first seize authority, starting by assembling her own elite squad. She suddenly lunges forward and plants a kiss on her dad's cheek to clear task number 1. Then whispers a secret. "Thank you for believing in me." As the assembly disperses, she prepares to blitz through the easier objectives, starting with total family domination. Objective 2, force Ares to acknowledge you as a genuine family member. While she was convinced this quest would be a total walk in the park and raced to invite Ares to high tea, she was suddenly paralyzed because of an incredibly foreign, bone-chilling sensation. The presence of the person standing right before her was so frigid it was downright terrifying. But before 3 seconds had even ticked by, Aries immediately flashed his signature radiant smile, making her jump and question if her eyes had played tricks on her. But seeing that exquisite face bathed in more sparkling filters than a Christmas tree, she brushed it off, failing to suspect her brother's true sinister mask at all. However, she didn't anticipate that her intimate tea time would be crashed by Cyan's annoying face tagging along. She could only shriek, internally dreading that these two would lung at each other and tear their heads off. Despite the tension witnessing the top-tier eye candy beauty factors doubled, she felt that even a hair-pulling brawl would be a glorious sight. Meanwhile, the sweet sibling interaction made Cyan want to gag his lunch, nearly making a reappearance. Still, Aries' flawless visuals had her totally simping. Without wasting a breath, Aries cut to the chase. Why was she so obsessed with mining mana stones? His gaze sharpened like an apex predator's, relentlessly probing Rotisa's intentions until she flinched. She couldn't exactly confess it was because that trash system quest commanded her to do it. She could only play the part of an innocent brat who just happened to find it flashy and asked for a new toy. Because everyone claims those mines are hollow, but if luck strikes, you're sitting on a literal mountain of gold, no cap. Suddenly, Aries' expression shifted into something disturbingly alien, radiating an icy aura that made her blood run cold. It felt like a crushing weight was bearing down on her, that same unsettling vibe Rotisa sensed when she first approached him. Clearly, that deceptive smile was still plastered on his lips, accompanied by the gentle gesture of offering her a cookie, but it felt wrong. She awkwardly mustered the courage to ask if he truly saw her as a family. Without a shred of hesitation, Aries confirmed it with a brilliant, blinding smile. Because they were siblings of the same blood, so it was a given. But the answer left her completely floored, because the active quest remained frozen and hadn't been marked as a success. Even though Aries' mouth kept spinning tales of Rotisa being his beloved little sister, those words lacked even a spark of warmth. On the contrary, they made her skin crawl with dread. Suddenly, Cyan stepped in front of her, his voice dripping with cryptic venom. Your acting skills are reaching legendary levels, aren't they? Only the kid could see through Aries' true nature, that he only viewed family as targets waiting to be eliminated. Cyan's gaze turned lethal as he interrogated Aries. He must have spotted the kidnappers that day, but didn't lift a finger to stop them. She was hit with total disbelief when the system pinged that Snitchbird 2 had been officially cleared. It all clicked. The one truly pulling the strings behind the kidnapping was none other than Aries. Since he was the one tasked with using magic to fortify the mansion, there was no way intruders went undetected. It was her own fault for being so hopelessly off guard. She had forgotten that these brothers of hers are the ultimate carriers of the Ferriton bloodline. Cold-blooded monsters driven by nothing but battle-hungry instincts. To Aries, every living soul except himself is a target. Recalling the system's hint that she wasn't alone anymore, it was actually signaling toward Cyan, who had finally chosen her side. Rotisa gulped hard and instinctively leaned into the boy's protective arm. She demanded verification one last time, was her kidnapping Aries' handiwork or not. Having nothing left to conceal, he finally let the mask drop and revealed his true face. While above his head, a status bar materialized with a soul-crushing negative 666 points. After toggling the affection meter, her brain short-circuited and refused to compute. Once the system finished processing her shock, she was absolutely reeling negative 666 points. How is it so catastrophically low, bro? Rotisa's voice trembled as she asked in utter heart-wrenching despair, "Why did you do it?" Aries seemed to have savored the look of betrayal from those he played. He calmly sipped his tea but was caught off guard when she started screaming at him at the top of her lungs. "I treated you with nothing but sincerity." She lost all control. She couldn't believe that her cute sweet efforts were met with a negative score that was basically infinite hate. In her fury, her words turned into a jumbled mess as she shrieked, "You gorgeous Aries, you think being a top-tier hottie gives you a pass. You're a total snake." But somehow it came out sounding like a backhanded compliment, leaving the guy feeling zero remorse. He even had the audacity to add a dozen more sparkling filters to his aura. That's a wrap for this video. If you enjoyed the ride, hit that like button so Bear can bring you more heat. Peace out, everyone.